Welcome to JustWannaQuilt, a research podcast coming out of Tulane University Law School, where we explore all kinds of things, stories about quilting, tools, field trips, maybe some famous quilters stop by, and, of course, a little bit of copyright thrown in just for fun. I'm Dr. Elizabeth Townsend Guard. I'm a law professor, and I just want to quilt. So today on the show we have, it's really hard to actually say who's on the show today. Today on the show we have Tula-pink and mary-fons at the house in New Orleans for a 2.5 hour discussion of everything you can imagine. It was pretty magical. It was amazing. So I hope you enjoy listening. Grab some sewing, grab some quilting. If you're driving, I hope you got a long drive ahead. It was awesome. I hope you enjoy it.
Interestingly, like
all right,
the same
good?
size as my ring size. It's weird. But yeah, we'll try it on.
Okay. All right, you guys ready?
Yes.
All right, well, I'm super excited and way amazed that you are in my weird space. So it's very cool. So I know this is the most ridiculous question I have for you. I totally know who you are and I've spent all day with you, but because we're preserving him for the Quilt Alliance, can you tell me who you are and where are you?
Where am I?
Where are you?
Like emotionally?
Exactly,
or,
right, exactly.
My name is Tula-pink.
Awesome.
And, well, like, where am I in terms of what?
Like you're in New Orleans. We're
I'm in
recording
New Orleans.
Right.
Yes.
Right. But
yes.
you're visiting. Right.
I feel like that's a really broad question.
It is. Like, where are you
are
from?
you?
That's a really hard one, too, right?
Yeah,
Like,
where I'm from.
Why are
is
you
a hard
asking?
one.
I always
Yes,
ask. What do you want to know about me?
Right. And I'm mary-fons, and I'm in New Orleans on, what street are we on?
Vincennes Place.
Vincennes Place.
Awesome.
Yes.
Cool. Awesome. All right. So you are probably the two most famous people I could have in my house at this point in my life. That is so extremely
We
exciting.
agree.
We totally agree. Totally.
Now that that's out of the way.
And so, listen, you have been interviewed like about a bazillion times about everything in the world. So we're not going to talk about that stuff.
Awesome.
But what we are going to do is put links to those interviews you've already given. So if people don't know who you are, start with that stuff. So I've been boning up on all this in a great way. So we're going to talk about a bunch of stuff today. We'll try to go maybe, how long do you guys want to go? Like,
Just roll it.
Okay.
Roll tape.
Yeah, I can
okay,
talk
cool.
forever.
Okay,
so.
cool. Awesome.
This is good. This is the
Don't
easy
put
part.
boundaries on me, okay?
All right, that sounds good. I'm going to ask a question that we ask of everyone so that we have it as for our research, which is for each of you, what's your first memory of someone sewing or quilting in your life?
My first memory is of myself because I come from a non-sewing family. I sewed my first thing when I was 12. I don't think it could be categorized as any specific type of object, but yeah, that was my first encounter with sewing, was literally teaching myself to sew when I was 12 years old.
And that I saw your first quilt. Is that the cave thing with the?
It's the first quilt that
first
survived.
Quilt. The first quilt that survived.
Because my original quilts, my very first quilts, I didn't know how to finish them. So I would make quilt tops, and then I would wrap them around myself, sew them down the side, and wear them until they fell apart.
I totally love
So that cave quilt that has embroidered skeletons
I love
on it,
it,
because
yes.
I wanted to create...
Because you were way too cool.
Well, I really needed to, I was quilting, which wasn't cool, and so I needed to keep my, angsty tween street cred, so
Totally.
I embroidered skeletons
I get
all
that.
over it.
Yeah. I get that.
Just to say, no, this isn't a grandma craft, I made it cool, because I put,
How old were you when you made that?
probably 15, 14.
So, what year was that, Tula? Because we're about the same age, but 90s, mid-90s, right?
Mid-90s, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it was Kate's first line of fabric.
Really?
Yeah.
And how did you pick that? Did you know? Was it just something you were drawn
it was so
to?
easy.
It was so easy. Is it like when I told you about my kids finding your fabric?
Yes,
you just went
it
in and it was
was
like, that's the only one I want to do?
At the time, so this was Kate Fassett, who is a legend, his very first fabric line.
Yeah.
And it's the first time I ever walked into a store and saw fabric that was not a reproduction or a novelty.
Because of the time period you started quilting in was all that reproduction-y kind of...
That's all there was.
Kind of stuff.
It was either reproduction, or if it was new design work, it was a novelty. So it was a teddy bear line for babies, or it was,
So do you think you would be quilting if there hadn't been that line there? Do you think that was part of the draw?
No, I would still be quilting because I started quilting before that happened. And what I would do is take these fabrics, these reproduction fabrics, I would dye them in the washing machine.
Oh, you're so cool.
I would embroider skeletons on them. I would screen print on them. I would draw on them just to make something that was like something I wanted to use. And so when I saw this line of, and it was Kaif's first fabric line was wovens. They were woven stripes.
I didn't know.
And
really
he
cool.
didn't do prints until actually quite a while later.
Really?
Which is funny because he's a painter. You'd think that's right where he'd go to. But he started with these wovens because, and I'm going to butcher this story. You can find it out better from him. But apparently he fell upon in his travels this village of women who were making things and like
weird.
Yeah, and like, you know, because he travels constantly
In like India?
and like somewhere. I mean, granted, it's not my story, so I don't know all the terms. But and someone came to him and said, "You're a painter and you're a famous knitter. Do you want to design a fabric line?" He goes, "Well, there's actually this village of women that like weave things, and what if we did something with that?" And so his first line was wovens, and he only did wovens for a while,
For
as far
whom?
as I know.
Who was he
Free
working?
Spirit from the beginning.
Wow. That's
yeah.
interesting. That's unusual, right, to stay with the same design. Is it unusual?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, no.
Interesting.
Yeah.
All
Yeah,
right.
back then maybe it's,
First memory of someone sewing or quilting?
It's pretty misty-eyed kind of thing. I mean, it is not just my first memory of someone quilting, but my first memory. I have tried.
Your first memory?
What is our first memory? It's weird, you know, memory is a strange thing. But my first, like, sentient moment, I was laying on my mother's chest, you know, and I remember hearing the resonance of her voice speaking, you know, I wasn't speaking at the time. Like, I was a very small child, and I was laying against her chest, and I could hear her heart beating and her voice, and she was hand quilting in a hoop in a rocking chair out on the farm. That's my first memory. I mean, maybe I've constructed that idea, but I remember that. I remember.
I'd go with it.
Yeah, it's pretty good, right? And she was a fine hand quilter. She hasn't done it in years, but I remember that. I remember the sound of her voice in her chest.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so you are both, what's interesting about having a conversation with both of you is that, Mary, your family is like royalty in quilting. You grew up in it, right? There's really no one else like that.
That was Tulas saying, by the way, not
Right.
Mary.
Okay, yeah, God, please. I'm like wincing, like, well, you know.
And Tula came up from music industry and graphic art, being an illustrator, very different backgrounds. But you both have family as really core to who you are, your businesses, what you do. So I'm really interested
I like
in
to
that
think
part.
that in quilting, like, Mary is old money and I'm nouveau riche.
Indeed. And actually, talking about family is important, certainly. But one other thing about Tula and I, and like the space we occupy, like the location of us in the quilt industry, which I know, we're going to talk about the industry more, but you and I are both hard to place, I feel. And I think
agree.
that's one of the reasons that we have always kind of jammed on it, and we've gotten to know each other a little bit better in the past couple years. But, Tula, I'm going to speak for
I consider
for
you my best friend, so go ahead.
Thank you. And we have necklaces that we made in New Orleans this morning. But, there's very, not misconception, but people sort of place Tula in the modern. Some people place Tula like as a modern quilter, but I have never seen that from you. It's far more contemporary. Maybe the color palette is similar, but and I'm not a modern quilter either. I don't make so-called modern quilts as such, right? Like I've always been more traditionally based. Anyway, it's sort of hard, but because of the virtue of our age and when we came up and how we've sort of navigated this in the past 10, 12, 15 years, we straddle old school, new school. We're not, it's hard to place us, and I've always felt a kinship with you because of that.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah.
That's really cool. Yeah. All right, so tell me about your family. Tell me about what role does your family play in your life and your work?
You begin.
Okay.
Because it's a little, you start.
Well, I mean, my whole world is my family. I mean, I didn't do that on purpose. It's just, so as a design studio, I have 2 full-time employees. My mom as the studio manager, and she arranges all my travel, does all the scheduling, really makes sure I stay on task, and get to places on time.
All right, so how does that work with your mom relationship versus your business relationship? Is it the same?
We had to learn. I mean, it was a real learning curve because really from 5 p.m. on, my mom's the boss. But from 9 to 5, I'm the boss.
So interesting.
Technically.
Right.
But not really.
Not really.
With my mom, that was a little bit more of a learning curve, because how do you tell your mom what to do? Like, how do you tell your mom, you did this in this way?
Say, like, at a certain age, you definitely tell your mother what to do. Like, you're like 14, 15.
Yeah, it's
right?
true.
Right,
You know,
but
very
I've gotten through
but
the
not
teenage
business,
years
right?
and now
Exactly,
realize my
exactly.
place again.
Exactly,
So it's really difficult,
right.
but I will say, and then my younger brother, Cameron, he's younger by about 9 years.
Yeah.
And he is, I would say, my right hand. He's my partner. He runs all the social media, manages all the marketing, and I mean, we work really closely together. And
He's 6 feet 7 inches tall.
Wow.
yes,
He's
the
very tall.
the quilting ladies love him.
Yeah.
But you know,
So interesting.
I think I will totally freely admit that the first couple years were a little rough. Trying to figure out our places. We're also all 3 dominant alphas.
Interesting.
And what we finally settled into was everyone's essentially the CEO of their own area.
I love that.
And when your conversation verges into their area, they're the final word.
That's really great.
So it's really more democratic than like a traditional, like, my name's on the door, I'm in charge. When we're talking about design, my word's the final word. When we're talking about marketing and social media, Cameron has the last word. And when we're talking about really anytime, my mom is always the winner of the argument anytime we can't agree. Like, so for instance, setting up a trade show booth with family that all think that they know the best way to do it.
Yeah.
We decided a few years ago, and this has worked out beautifully for us, that the only one of us who has absolute total authority is the mom, because we're both her children.
Whoa. Really?
Yeah.
So she is now the official foreman of the trade show booth, and we cannot, and we set up
Really?
boundaries. We are not allowed to argue with her when it comes to how to set it up.
Now, do you argue differently as siblings versus in the business? Or is
I
it the
will
same?
say, I mean, and this is going to sound like a crock of, you know what, but we don't argue a lot.
That's really cool. Because you all
There's
have
a
this
ton of
structure,
respect.
So you know. Yeah.
There's a ton of respect between all of us. That's pretty.
You can see it. It's yes.
That's really cool.
I mean, we all like. I mean, and you know, my mom had me fairly young. I'm her oldest, and my mom and I are incredibly close.
Okay, so Patrick the cat hasn't invaded. Do you want me to put him back?
No,
he
I'm
got
fine.
snuck. He snuck out. So.
I'm fine.
Okay.
But so it's a real. We had to really cultivate a level of respect that was outside of the family relationship, and that took some doing, and it took some really, like, we had to make that decision to respect each other in a way outside of family memberness.
Okay.
Right.
So I've interviewed a bunch of people now, and there's a lot of family-run businesses, and it's amazing to see, like, from the stencil company to Leah Day to the Crafty Gemini. There's this really interesting moment when, like, the husband usually, in this case, or the daughter in the stencil company said, okay, let's all just do this. Did you have that moment as a family of, like, look, I've gotten to the, like, or they were just always
I mean,
there?
really it happened as my career grew. So I started out by myself. It got too big, so my brother graduated from ASU. He went to business school, and he graduated, and I said, come work for me. And so he came and worked for me, and then it got to the point where I was traveling 7 months out of the year. It was taking all my time to make travel arrangements and to figure out where I needed to be. And I had never been late for a deadline in my life. And all of a sudden I was late every time. And so that's when my mom came in. And I said, I need help, but I need someone I can trust who always has my best interest first.
Yeah.
And
who more than your mom. And I will say that I mean, I don't know, we have a pretty unique relationship in that we're all, like, best friends. I mean, we hang out. Yeah.
Like, outside of work. Like, my brother and I go to the movies together. My mom and I hang out. We're together, I would say, 6 days a week.
That's very
without fail.
Yeah, Sid, my kid, said a few days ago, she goes, you know, because I have this theory of circles, like you've got your inner circle, and I'm like, I'm putting them on a outer circle. It's a moment of, like, you're no longer in the inner circle. But she's like, it's not inner circle for me. It's The people in my life that I'll just drop everything, like if they call, I'll drop everything. It doesn't matter what's happening, and I'm there completely for them. And it sounds like that's sort of what your family is kind
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No question.
Really cool.
Yeah.
Mary, what about your family?
Well, when I started making quilts like 10 years ago. I had what I call the quilt epiphany. My life completely fell apart. I had gotten married, and I had been sick on and off, like weirdly, had very unpleasant symptoms I didn't want to talk about for a number of years. I was a young woman, and it was bathroom stuff, and I was like really not okay with it. And the nature of an autoimmune disease like ulcerative colitis, which I ended up having. Oh, great. So congratulations. We're part of this unholy club now. But I had these weird symptoms and so forth. So it didn't, I never had a diagnosis. So I was engaged.
Really
it was
that's
awful.
like really stressful because when you don't have a diagnosis, your life is awful because you just go from doctor to doctor, and people are like, I don't know. Right?
Yes, exactly. And I didn't want to go to the doctor, so I would get some answer, and it wasn't great.
Yeah.
So anyway, so I was engaged, and the whole family was like, well, as soon as you're married, it's time to deal with your health because it was getting worse and worse and worse. So I made it through my wedding day. It was September 2008, and I just nosedived right after the wedding. I mean, my body was like, no more. So I went to Mayo Clinic way before my appointment was scheduled, which was scheduled the next month. Anyway, a month to the day after my wedding, I was having surgery at Mayo Clinic, and this is all getting to the family thing. But so I was at Mayo Clinic for a month after the surgery. Wow. Like my complications had complications. It was very, very bad. So I nearly died, terrible. Right? Yeah. And that was just the beginning of like the odyssey that I've been on. So I had, and my marriage did not last. So for a number of reasons, but in the following year, like after all of that and into the next year, I mean, I started quilting because I never wanted to do it before. It was what my mother did for work. It wasn't, we were writing plays
because
and
people may not know, listening, that your mom is super famous quilter.
Yes, yeah, Mary-fons,
super famous. We're not
like
going to go
the
there.
famous
It's like
quilter.
the most famous,
yeah,
the industry
quilter.
is because of her.
Well, yeah, there's there's like the A team, right? Like Eleanor Burns, like Fons and Porter, like but there are some like it's like the Betty Crocker of the quilt industry, right?
So
it's it's not even like a name. It's like it's a thing now.
Yeah, it's a thing. It's a brand.
It's like big monument.
Right. And so I grew up with quilts and everything, but I had not done any quilting because it was what Mom did for work. But the way I say it, and it's kind of I don't know, it gets sort of trite, I guess, at a certain point, but my life fell apart, and like I sort of woke up with the desire, with the understanding that when your life is torn into a million pieces, for some of us, it makes perfectly good sense to tear up perfectly good fabric into a million pieces and sew it back together again. And I was like, I'm going to do this. And it was right around, so it was 2008, roughly. And Mom and Liz had sold the business in 2006. Yeah. And so Liz was on her way out. And so I, off the show.
2008.
Yeah.
So I have so many questions. Okay, so family. So family
well,
and that story. So 2006, you're also doing poetry.
Right, that's true. That's true.
So that's like a totally different. Like you're doing these dual roles from the beginning. Right?
I was not a quilter. I was making my living as a freelance writer and a performer in Chicago, slam poetry, touring. I mean, my first gigs were as a poet, which is crazy. I mean, did okay as a poet. Right? Yeah. So I was doing all that, and anyway, so I started making quilts, and the timing was right that I started making quilts, and the powers that be, the new owners of Fons and Porter, were like, oh, the Fons daughter is making quilts. Excellent. Do you want to be on the show? And I was like, sure. I needed the gig. I mean, I needed the money.
And you were a performer anyway, so it wasn't freaking you out.
No problem. But I didn't know how to sew. I didn't know how to make quilts. So I learned on TV. But to answer your question, I know that was a big lead up, but it's important because my mother has served in this industry as a bit of a protector, although she has completely let me be myself, and she has not sometimes almost, this is the real scoop now, sometimes almost to my disadvantage. She has allowed me to do things. She has not looked at my contracts. I signed a bad one once, and I actually had a come to Jesus moment with my mother some years ago when I was quite angry that she had let me, right? She had let me sign something, but she had no idea I had that anger. She had no idea that I wanted her to steward me more. I mean, she's always been, with myself and my two sisters, extreme. She has faith in us. She has like enduring faith in us, and that we will. She's fascinated by all of us, right? And so she just lets us do what we want to do. So over the years, I think I surprised some people by not leaving. Like, I'm still here, and I found my own path. It is very much a Liza and Judy situation. Not that she's like dangling me outside of the window like Judy did with Liza, but Judy was this person. She was a star. Right. And then Liza comes along, and everybody's like, oh, she's the daughter. Like, we'll see how long this lasts. You know, like, she's had all these doors open for her. But no, Liza was great. And she had her own vision, and she made her own career. And I'd like to think that that's similar.
Well, and it's so interesting because you're at this moment with Quilt Folk magazine and other adventures that there's going to be a generation that's going to know you and not your mom.
Yeah, it's strange, right?
So that's already happening.
Yeah, could be.
It's definitely already happening.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So interesting. So interesting. Well, I'm really curious about your mom because I saw a video of your two sisters, and you all seem really great. Like, things are going well. So as like on that mom side of it, since I'm in that stage, I have to be like, I need some advice. Yeah. So what did your mom do that made you? Because you're all very different kids, and you all you've got different interests and different, like, 3 girls. But what did your mom do to sort of encourage that in terms of that?
What you just made me think of, it's not very kind to my mother, although it was her love and her she's a single mother, so supporting 3 kids on quilting. That's so she always, education key, reading from so all of that foundation was there, interested in books and curiosity. So that's all coming from mom and her parenting. But in fact, she was gone a lot.
You said that about your mom.
Is that right?
That your mom was working.
Yes.
Right?
She had to, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Literally putting bread on the table. We did not, there was no money. We had to wait until mom got a royalty check to get school shoes, and we didn't get them until the royalty check came. Yeah. So she was gone a lot, and like, we were like latchkey kids, and we made it work, and we had a lot of freedom. Sometimes, she missed plays and she missed concerts and things, but we had a strong sense of self, each one of us, from the start, because we had to.
You had to. You feel that way too?
I do. Well, my mom is just a fiery, independent spirit. Just an incredible woman.
For the record, I love your mother.
Yeah, she's pretty great.
Love her.
But growing up, my mom, she was a real estate agent. It was the one thing that she could do, like, that she could go get certified in and then like start working right away. And she would be in 5-inch stiletto heels and a power suit, and then come home and be in a tree with a chainsaw 10 minutes later. That's my mom, though.
That's so
she can be anything in any place at any time and still remain this remain herself, which I always found so fascinating. And I was like, cool. If I can grow up to be half of that, I will call myself a successful woman.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So let's talk a little bit about that, because that was one of the conversations. Feminism and quilting and being who you are and identity. Sort of what roles that kind of comes from mom, that comes from your independent space. Sort of, and we were going to talk about feminism and quilting. So one of the things I think is, what I like, Virginia Woolf's A Room of One's Own. Quilting requires women to be you went to college, I'm taking your room, right? And all this space, I'm taking really more of this space. And I think women don't do, and mostly women, I know some men, but mostly women, and something about quilting, all of it, the community, the space, the buying the fabric, there is this sort of declaration of independence. I think it's a very feminist act. So I'm curious what you all think about that space of who you are, identity, quilting, feminism, whatever you want to talk about.
I would love to talk about feminism, but
I would like you to go first.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
You take mary-fons.
Exactly. Well, I do want to point out too that Virginia Woolf's the full thing that she said is that she said for a woman to be a writer, she needs a room of her own, but she also needs an income.
That's right.
And
hugely,
most people don't,
right?
It's hugely important because
right.
if you can't support yourself, have your room for a week and then you're out in the street.
That's right.
So, well, in terms of, being my own person, and we talked about that a little bit before, and that's important, but I've been reading a lot about quilting and feminism, and the reason why I gave a lecture on it at QuiltCon, I'm giving a lecture on feminism in the coming year at QuiltCon, but I lectured about the AIDS quilt this past year because I wanted to know about it. Yeah. And giving a lecture on these things is how I really learn about it. And I was like, why don't quilters talk about the AIDS quilt? Why is it never?
Yeah,
why does it never come up?
Right?
well,
There's a lot of content.
It's fascinating. But I also want to know about feminism, because if you look at so-called second wave feminism, and we have to call it so-called these days because a lot of people were not caught in that wave. It was mostly upper class, middle class white ladies. So a lot of the quilters who are quilting now, who Tula and I teach in these workshops, we're with these ladies all day, all weekend, and we talk about everything, right? We talk about death and birth and fires and floods and love and children and illness, and we talk about everything. But I was like, why doesn't anybody ever talk about feminism? Because they came of age. These women came of age. Okay. And they're the demographic. They are the upper middle, right?
And many of them worked and now are retired. They were in the workforce at a time when they were sort of making these moments of change.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
why do they not talk about it?
Because, I'm reading all these essays. There's really a lot of scholarship out there that is so interesting. But in the 1970s, when quilts got into major museums, Jonathan Holstein, like all of the stuff that happened in 71 with the Whitney exhibit, there was a fracturing that happened. When feminism and art got a hold of quilts, everything changed. And a lot of the quilters who were making traditional quilts at the time were mad. They were a little unhappy with the feminists holding up the quilt as this icon of feminism, this object of women's history. They were like, I just make quilts. Why am I a feminist now? Because I make quilts for my family. I don't want any part of your I don't even know what that means. What does feminism even mean? So the feminists, you could say, some of the second wave feminists totally co-opted the quilt. They appropriated the quilt as a feminist object. And a lot of traditional quilters were not okay with that. And I think this is fascinating and valid. I think it's valid, and I consider myself a feminist, whatever, it's very complicated. But a lot of the art versus craft split about our quilts, that happened in the 70s, and so did the feminist quilter versus traditional quilter happen then too. It is very interesting and very complicated. So
where do the modern quilters fit into that? They come later.
The modern quilters are making quilts that are for the wall. At QuiltCon, these are not utility quilts, so it's very interesting what's happening. Yeah,
it is.
Yeah, I'm nerding out, but now I'm sorry.
No, it's all
about
good.
That. But yeah, I think about
it. All right, so feminism.
Yeah, I feel like I'm like an intuitive sitting in a room of academics right now, and I feel way out of my depth. No. But I'm probably more of one of those that is don't put your feminism on my quilt.
Totally.
And I would absolutely self-identify as a feminist, but it's not connected to my quilting.
Yeah. Explain that. Tell me why.
Quilting, I don't see myself as being a quilter as an act of feminism. Right. An act of being a woman. It has nothing, it's totally separate. An artist. Right. Yeah, and I would say that probably in terms of interest, I'm more interested in the art versus craft argument.
Yes.
Very much so, and I think about that a lot. But I come from a heavily matriarchal family. The women have always held the power in my family.
Even if they didn't call themselves feminists, right? They didn't used to.
And
it
they
was just
actually
the way.
Very much don't call themselves feminists because I don't think they totally understand what that means.
I don't understand what it means, by the way, anymore.
I think a lot of the older women in my family think of feminism as a violent word. An aggressive word, and they don't see themselves as aggressive women.
It's humanism as opposed to we're humans first, our gender second, or they don't see it.
I just don't think they think about it.
They don't. They just do, and that's the same thing with the quilts. Is people didn't used to have the "Am I an artist or a maker?" discussion. They just made quilts, and what's amazing, and same thing with quilters and feminists. They're I love making this. Making quilts is what I do. There's an argument that we used to be way more unified before this crap happened, because now we have to say, well, are you an artist? Are you a quilter? Are you a maker or an artist?
I've been thinking about this conversation a lot.
I think about this a ton.
I've interviewed all these people.
Well, especially because I come from art. I come from an academic art school background.
So when you make something, so first of all, two parts of this. So when you make something, Tula, it is stunning, right? Now you do a ton of different, right? Yes, totally. We all agree.
We all agree. We're nodding. Yes.
We're so the idea of figuring out I mean, we were a wreck yesterday. I was like, even wrapping a present for you was like, you know, the quilt. I was like, I can't wrap something for her, right? Because you're like this big,
It
right?
is a big deal.
Oh my
I will
gosh,
say that
right?
that is probably why no one has ever made me a gift.
Oh.
Really? Oh, we gotta make you. Oh,
No,
that's
it's totally
ridiculous.
fine. Like, I don't mind. But it's just, I just think it's an interesting fact.
It's like no one ever asking
one
out
makes
the
me
most
anything.
beautiful girl in
Right,
class.
that's
Yeah.
so true. And I really like the fact that you don't give away your quilts, because I'm not giving away anything right
Yeah, I
now
don't
because
give
I'm
away
doing this
anything.
research, and people
I
are like, well, why aren't you giving
really
them
need
away?
them.
And I'm like,
I need every
them.
quilt I make.
totally need. I mean, mine are very average.
I mean, my quilts
but-
for me are a diary, so it's like
Yeah.
giving away diary pages. That
So
seems
interesting.
like a weird concept to me.
Okay, so we get these. So I've been interviewing all these different people, and people are like, all right, when are you a professional? When are you this? When are you that? Jackie Gehring put up something she was working on. I'm like, it's gorgeous. I'm like, my stuff would never look like that. My stuff is never going to look like yours. And there's something, I can't figure it out. Now, is it because you went to art school? Is it because your brain is so incredible that there's no way, like, there are different levels of quilting, and you can see that in the local quilt shows versus the national quilt shows, or your line. And I don't understand what that is. Like, because I think it's like acting, where people always, because I worked at professionally as an actor and I had been trained. So, and you've been trained as well in performing, and it's different. Like a trained actor is different than someone who thinks, oh, I can just act. Do you feel that way with quilting? Do you think there's a divide?
Yeah, well, I mean, yes and no.
Right?
I mean, when I entered the quilting industry, you know, as a fabric designer, was my first entrance into the quilting world as an industry, right?
What year?
Right.
When was that?
2007.
Yeah.
Actually, you guys are right in that same.
Yeah.
That's so
2007,
weird.
2008,
Yeah.
big year.
It was
for
a big
lot
year.
of Missouri
Yeah.
stars. Anyway,
Yeah.
That's so
And
interesting.
but I mean, I remember the time that I went from being an amateur to a professional.
And
it
what
was
was that?
when it's fear. So you walk into a trade show and you say, I'm a professional now because I'm in the show and I have this credential.
Right.
And you look around at the quilts and you go, holy crap, I need to get really good at this really fast.
totally.
Because
So true.
all of a sudden you're looking at really like the pillars
Stunning,
of
right? Like
of the
insanely-
pillars of craft in these quilts. They're expertly made. They're beautifully finished. And mine were still really home sewer-ish, you know, because I was self-taught. I didn't really know how to do anything. And so between that market and the following market, 7 months later, Quilt Market, the big trade show, I had to become a professional quilter.
How did you do that?
And I asked every single person, every
Yeah.
single thing. I slowed down when I sewed. I start to, because it didn't matter before.
Right.
And my points didn't line up. No one was going to look at it except someone I gave them to, and they better damn well be happy with it because it's a gift,
Right.
you know?
Yeah.
Right.
Like, it's a totally different concept.
Yeah.
And I had to really fight against my age because I was 26 at the time. And nobody took me seriously because I was 30 years younger than most of the people in that room on average.
But at 26, you already had a ton of experience. You were coming in as an illustrator. You'd worked in the record industry. You
Sure.
had so
Yeah.
much more experience than most people coming
Yes,
into
and
it,
most people
right?
in that industry. I mean, most people move from, I would say the industry is not totally, but I would say at least half of it's made up of people who turned a hobby into a career.
That's most of what I'm finding. That's what exactly.
And I went in as I went into it as a career. I mean, I was a hobby sewer for sure, but I got real serious about it when it became my career because I don't think
Really
it's worth
interesting.
doing unless you can do it well. Like, I'm not going to go into something and say, I'm going to go do this thing and I'm going to try to get someone to pay me for it, but I'm not going to try to be really good at it.
Right. And the other thing,
You
you know,
like
there's
this too.
well, yeah, and there's
Right?
Tula,
TV learning.
there's Tula's brain and just raw talent and stuff, but truly, once again on the record, it's great.
Yeah.
There's an actual record. People say that all the time. For
Yeah,
the record,
right.
we're literally on the record. Hardest working woman. I mean, that I know. I mean, you work. Someone told me, Mary-fons, you work like an immigrant. I don't know if that's a terrible thing to say. I think it's a good thing to say. I mean, it's like I work, my life depends on it, and you're the same. And so I also heard it takes 10 years to make an overnight success. You know, it's like we work and work and
I would
work
say
on
that's
all
super
these things.
true.
And you work so hard. So there's that too. And just one thing to place historically, like when you came in as well and when I did. I mean, this was the era of there's sort of a before and after 2008, 2007, because you're talking about the Amy Butler time. Like you and Amy Butler.
Amy Butler changed everything. everything.
Yes, she did.
Opened the door that allowed me in.
In case people don't know who she is, tell them who Amy Butler is and why that's the
So, Amy Butler is a fabric designer. She showed up in the industry a few years before I did, so I would say I don't know for sure.
I think I made my
05,
very first quilt.
06,
Yeah,
maybe.
exactly.
And she was, I mean, she went to Kansas City Art Institute. She worked at Hallmark, so she was a graphic designer, illustrator. Not totally sure. Like, again, I don't know her story, but she was making these bags for Country Living magazine. These bag patterns for Country Living magazine. And she came in and wanted to design her own fabric because there wasn't really anything around that she liked, and she's an incredible visual mind. And so she went around, and Free Spirit finally gave her, they're like, yeah, we'll produce your fabric. And she came in and changed everything.
Really did.
Because she had a whole different look that wasn't in the industry. I mean, these prints were huge.
Pastels, florals. It was really...
It was big, and it was bright, and it was happy, and it was modern, and it felt so new and fresh. And then she took it a step further, and she didn't just put out a fabric collection. She presented a brand. And she was really the first one to do that this well. She came in to a trade show that was all curtains with a little table and a chair in every booth, and built a small house and invited you into a beautiful living room where she was displaying her fabrics. It was she was the first one to create a lifestyle brand out of quilting fabric.
That's really
and she came with a lookbook and a catalog that she did herself, and it was branded, and it was so professional, and you didn't feel, it was the very first time in my experience where I bought a piece of fabric feeling like I was buying into an entire lifestyle, not just an object. I was buying walking in tall grass in the sunshine. I was buying smelling really good. She smells really good.
She does. She's very tall and pretty too.
She's tall and gorgeous, and her husband's beautiful.
Same,
and they're cool.
And they're nice, but
it changed everything.
It changed everything.
It really did.
So you think about, like, your mom changes everything. That moment of, like, it professionalizes the quilting industry in this interesting way. That sort of starts with that kind of space, right?
Yeah.
And then this next phase, which and then branding. You're both like, branding's huge, right?
It's
so it's
huge,
a little bit about the IP stuff.
Yeah.
So branding. So how important is branding? How do you protect your brand? How do you promote your brand?
Branding is everything.
Branding is everything.
I mean, because really, like, the whole nut of my business is that somebody can walk into a shop full of a bunch of stuff and identify my product from a distance.
That's right.
That's
and
the whole thing.
Right?
Yeah.
And be like, I want
it.
that one.
Right.
Yeah. And want it. I mean, protecting it is difficult. But I think that my brother said something really kind of amazing to me. Well, he says a lot of amazing things. He's kind of like a casual savant. Like, he just says brilliant things, drops the mic, and leaves the room.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, and it just changes everything. But, I was getting really, really upset about being copied. Like, it's very upsetting because you do, like, forging that path takes a lot of work. And then when someone just jumps on the path.
How are they copying you? Are they reproducing the fabric entirely? Are they taking
well,
bits of
that
yours?
has happened.
No,
but,
yeah.
that has happened. But it's like, when I first started designing fabric, I was doing, and I still do to this day, this, like, hidden animal thing. Like, I hide animals in the fabric. Like to me, a fabric without an animal in it, like, doesn't feel finished, or it doesn't feel special. Because animals are just weird. They're like aliens that live among us. I remember sitting in a booth. I was in England, in London, at a trade show, or like a retail show. I was hired to be there and sit in a booth and sign things. And I was sitting there, and there were two people on the other side of the wall that I could hear very clearly. And they said, and people that I respected a ton.
Oh, no.
And they said, and I overheard them having a conversation that said, if she just take the goddamn animals out, she might have an actual shot at this.
Oh, no.
Like, she's kind of good,
Oh,
but...
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, no, and it was devastating at the time.
God.
But now I love it. Like, it's like my favorite thing, right?
Right.
And I thought, to myself...
Jesus.
Awful.
Well, and so basically, like, I did this hidden animal thing. No one was doing it at the time in quilting. I mean, you know, it's not like I invented it. But in quilting, nobody was doing it. It was very much florals, like, and still is to a great degree. And, you know, and then it was like, I would do a fabric with this animal in it that looked in this way. And then 6 months later, I'd see 5 fabrics with that same animal in a certain way. And it's like, it was clearly inspired by my original, which is fine.
Right.
But it still...
a little
it still gets you down. Like, it still hurts your soul a little bit.
So let me ask you that. So there's it's called levels of abstraction. It's from this case. So the idea of hidden animals, not protected.
No,
right?
not
You're
protected.
okay. You're cool with other people hiding animals.
Yeah, because
And
I've been
then-
doing it for 10 years. You're not going to do it as well as I do.
That's right. And your brand.
Indeed.
And,
Indeed.
Right.
Yeah.
And your trademark and
Oh, I
your
didn't get
brand.
to the good thing that my brother said, which I will get to
Oh,
after
that's right.
this.
That's right. Yes.
But go ahead.
Okay. And
Continue,
then
because I think
there's a spectrum, right? To the point of copying, like exact copying. But then the middle part's really hard for people to understand.
Oh, it's super
right?
gray.
So
yeah.
tell me, at what point do you feel like they really have infringed your work? Like, is it
Legally?
or just personally? Like, it could be legally.
Personally, I think when I can see myself in the work, when I can see myself in it.
Yeah.
That's
That's a great definition.
like,
That's
you
a
know.
really great definition.
And one of the things, and which leads me to what
Right.
my brother told me
Tell
that
me
was
what
very
is it?
important.
Yes.
And I mean, it seems super obvious, but like, I would say it really changed my world.
Yeah.
He said, because I was very upset, like I was probably crying. I mean, you know,
my
I do
God,
that
yeah.
sometimes. Like out of anger, like just
I
stop,
Yeah.
like just stop
Totally.
doing this to me, you
Yes.
know, like. I scratched to get here with this look. Like,
Right.
go find your own look. Like,
Right.
you know, whatever.
And it takes you a lot of time to build these
It
things.
takes you a lot of time
God.
to figure out who you are as an artist in this medium. I
Right.
mean, it's a real thing, like, that you have to get to. And I had done it so unsuccessfully for so long, you know, that it, like, I felt like, don't get on my train now that it's working.
Yeah.
But what my brother said to me, and he goes, well, I mean, if they're copying you, then aren't they always one step behind you?
That's lovely.
And I was like,
and that's what
I was like,
yeah.
yeah. He goes, so just do something better. And I was like, okay, yeah, I can do that. Like he's like, I mean, and really that's the reality. I've already done this thing. If it's being copied, I've already done it. I've made my money off of it.
Yeah.
I'm now moved on to something else.
Yeah.
So if you want to pick up my crumbs, go for it.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
you know,
Right.
so it's actually put me in a much better mental
And we see
space
that with
about
like
it.
knockoffs in the fashion industry. It's almost part of it now. Like if they're not getting knocked off, that means that it wasn't a success.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
there's a
Right.
kind of if there are, and same with YouTube with all
Yeah.
the copying and all that.
Yeah.
Stuff. There's a weirdness to it.
Well, and I found too that we talked about this a little bit at lunch, which you people out there don't know about, but sorry,
We had
you
a
should
great
have come to lunch
lunch.
for
It
us.
was delicious.
But the more of my hand that's in the work, the harder it is to copy, because the way I draw is
love
very particular to my hand, the way my hand and wrist and elbow all move together, right?
Yeah.
So just the way somebody's handwriting is different from another, the way I move my hand across a piece of paper is different from another, and the more of that I put in it, the harder it is to copy.
And it seems like the closer they get to that, it clearly is infringement.
Yes, absolutely.
Right. Yeah. I think like
Sorry.
for me I mean it's tricky. I mean my brand is connected to it's my name. You know, but mary-fons is different, very different from Mary-Fons. However, I mean
Which is
Mary-Fons is
So in case people don't know.
yes, and it's spelled Marianne, one word, so it's Marianne. And she sold her business. You know, Fons and Porter was sold, and that means that the trademark and my mother's name and likeness.
Right, of publicity.
Right? Yep. She can do nothing in the quilt world without their permission, right?
Yeah.
I am not my mother. I am my own woman. But we do have the same name. And so it's come up a couple times over the years and been a little bit weird. But the truth is that I have been my own brand far longer than just me being in the quilt world. I had my logo, the Heart Plus logo. It's trademarked. It's been trademarked forever. And I used it on my blog years ago. So I have all this prior use of being mary-fons. So I'm a blogger, I was a writer, published a lot of places, whatever. So I'm myself. And then no one expected me to start quilting and stay. So
So how did that work with it? Did there was any weirdness? And you don't have to talk about it, but were they unexpectedly weirded out that you were now your own brand and they had bought Stefan's name?
I think
they probably thought they bought it all, right?
I think that someone along the way probably had a few curse words that they didn't sign, that I didn't sign a contract that signed my name and likeness away. And I was presented with that contract, and I did not sign that contract.
So funny.
Yeah.
I was about 19. I was going up for a pilot. I don't talk about this stuff usually, but I was going up for a pilot, and I was at Network and NBC, and it was like this big deal. And I looked like 12, so they were going to hire me. And I did a really good job, and I knew I was going to get hired, and it was a terrible script. And then they presented me with that right of publicity thing. I was like 19, and they're like, you have 5 years, your name, your likeness, your signature. I was like, yeah, no.
No, it's
like,
a terrible
it's mine,
thing.
Right?
And there's
a really horrible moment of like, no.
Right.
Like,
but
just,
how do you make that choice at 19?
Yeah, you
that
don't.
Seems kind of exceptional.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
I ruined the interview, and then they brought me back. They thought I was nervous, and then I had to do it poorly to not get the job.
To not get it.
To not
Amazing.
get the job. None of my friends understood, because actors think like
Right.
and I wasn't one of those. I was
Smart.
Didn't want to be there anyway.
Oh
so.
God, you're smart.
But it was funny. That was that contract. It was that moment of like. You want everything that is me, the essence of me now. Like
it is truly
property?
a Kafkaesque,
It's very
horrifying
strange.
idea.
It was a bad moment.
That someone would own your name and your likeness. So, I had a non-compete clause in my contract with Fons and Porter that had a 2-year tail in it, and so part of my master plan, my evil genius sort of master plan was while I was waiting out that non-compete, I went and got a master's degree.
That's part of why you did that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's really interesting.
Yeah. So, I still worked, but I did actually a little bit of TV, but my non-compete was over on New Year's Eve, and I spent New Year's Eve with my guy in Manhattan, and we were, totally drunk, and we toasted to the fact that was totally over. Yeah. And
that
so
dramatically affected, in a good way.
Well,
but it affects, people to understand, what a non-compete clause means is that you're not allowed to do what you were doing previously for a certain period of time.
Correct.
And so that was part of the contract that you had, and so you figured out,
never sign one.
No.
Anyone who's listening to this,
or sign them in California,
or sign because they can't be enforced. But more and more, I think they're being enforced. But truly, for those who are out there who want to do patterns and want to do things, perhaps you have a blog or you have these things. These big companies will come to you, and it's very enticing because they are going to give you a book deal, or they're going to do tutorials with you, and they will fly you to the studio to film them, and they will do all these things.
Exciting.
It is exciting, and I have done a lot of great work that I'm proud of. Yes,
so it's your dream. You finally get to your
of
dream,
course.
and you have to sign a form, and you're like, "That's okay."
Yes,
right. It's the dream.
But there is just a lot because so much content has been given away. Because so much, we give you exposure. It's just not enough, and you're worth more. And so, if you're looking at non-competes or you're looking at some of these exclusive things, just get a lawyer. Get a lawyer first, and really consider the long view. It's very hard to consider the long view when you're 19.
It's not as expensive as you think to get a lawyer. Right. It's far less expensive than what you're going to deal with later.
Right. Precisely.
I think that's what keeps a lot of people. They're like, "Oh, I'm a small business. I can't afford that." It's like the two things that you can't afford at any level of business are a lawyer and an accountant. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No matter what.
Yeah.
And do you feel like the negotiation that you're respected more as well if you have a lawyer involved in it? Do you feel like, it's kind of the startup NDA, sign an NDA before you tell them your invention kind of thing.
Yeah. I think so. I think there's, especially in our industry, a craft-related industry, like Mary said, there's so much content being given away and just for exposure, and exposure is not pay, people. Just FYI.
Exposure is not pay.
Can't pay your rent with
not
exposure.
Pay. If you can't use what they're giving you in return for your work to buy food, it does not count.
Right.
But don't work for WIC either. But
don't work for what?
It's food stamps.
Oh yeah, food stamps. Yeah, right.
Yeah, that's not what I mean by that.
Right.
But it's I think so my point being that I think in this industry, people aren't used to dealing with actual business people. I think people are really surprised when they sit down with me in a boardroom or a conference room and start to nail out details.
Yeah.
That I know my business, I know my numbers, I know my value, you know, and I have real concrete information to back me up.
But how did
and
you
I have
figure
an
out how to
attorney,
do that?
and
right. So how did you figure out how? I mean, was it your brother going to business school that helped that part of it, or
no? I was already doing this but you know, I mean, maybe it's because I come from the music industry and that's just how business is done. But yeah, I mean, because for me, what I drew, my name and what I draw, it was all I had in this world.
Right.
It was everything to me.
Yeah.
It was everything in the whole world outside of my family, right? And sometimes above my family.
Okay,
so to protect that at all costs, like I was terrified of losing it. It's so easy to lose if you're not protecting yourself. You can lose it in a contract with a non-compete, or I mean, you can lose it so quickly. And I think it was just out of fear or just protecting that thing that was so important to me. It was my whole person.
Right. So how did you protect it? And how do you protect it? Maybe it's changed over time, but how do you protect that thing that is you in a legal sense?
I mean,
I pay someone to do that.
I pay someone to do it. I mean, absolutely. I had a contract. I had a contract recently, and I was just about to sign it. It was the same as the one I had before for this particular television appearance, and I noticed a couple things that were strange, and so I compared it to the last one that had been okay. But just before I sent it, I sent it to my lawyer, and she changed a thing, and then I signed it. But a friend told me once, it was so great. Experience is what you get when you don't get what you want. And that's great. I have it's experience is what you get when you don't get what you want, and I have been through it. So at 39, I mean, I sent it to my lawyer first, and that's it. And it sounds very fancy, and I think and for me too, I don't understand the kind of person I am when I say I send it to my lawyer first. I need to say that. I mean, I don't. Some of these things, I have an imposter complex. I people are going to find out I'm a phony. I don't know what I'm doing. I have too much responsibility. I'm faking all of this. I'm not.
It totally feels like something from the TV show Dallas or something.
Yes,
You're I'm going to send it to my lawyer. It does sound super pretentious, but it's.
But you have to, because no one else is going to do that for you. Maybe a parent and somebody who works with you. But it's important, and I think because it's a craft industry, Tula, you mentioned this, because it's. I think a lot of women aren't given these memos as we're growing up. These how to negotiate, how to say no, how to get a lawyer. We're not given that information. Yeah. We're not praised for asking, and so we have to take. There's your feminism, right? There's your sort of empowerment.
I think women don't want to seem difficult.
No, I don't. I'm terrified.
And I think, and I've really come to a place where I'm really cool with that.
I'm not.
If you want to think I'm difficult, that's fine, because I'm very well protected,
right.
And I get paid on time every time,
right?
Yeah. But
I'm
not difficult if you're reasonable,
right. I do pretty well.
Sage people don't wake the dragon.
Right. Exactly.
I do pretty well, but I waste time being. Well, I don't know. I tend to want to put people at ease, and I like that.
I'm really into that.
I think you catch more flies with honey, that kind of thing. That's from my mom completely. But I waste time sometimes trying to do that when I needn't, and it's very exhausting sometimes. And I like to do that naturally, but there comes a point where you need to, say no, hang up the phone, do these things, and I'm still learning it. Yeah, for sure.
I hang up on people a lot.
I have never hung up on anybody in my life.
I think I'm between the two of you, because I'm like, okay, look, I'm wearing my pink hat, I'm leaning in, I'm raising my hand now. This is what I want. I'm like, okay, I'm a little nervous about asking you for this, but I'm going to do this thing. So I even signed my email to my provost and dean.
That's great.
Wearing my pink hat.
Yeah, I think it's there's and I think this is just people. There's a fear of hearing no.
Yeah.
And once you get past for that, I mean. Like, for me, it's like, I'll ask for the world.
Yeah.
I mean, you can tell me no.
Right.
Yeah.
And then we can start the
Do you
conversation
think that's
again.
your LA background too? Because LA, you like, there's so much. Like, I remember I lived in LA for 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of no. There's just a lot of no. There's a lot of struggle. There's a lot of that, and it just can't be personal because there's so much. Do you know what I mean? There's so much going on, and there's so much businessy stuff.
I mean, I will say it's very much a learned behavior. I didn't start out this way. My
Yeah.
first fabric company, they said, "Oh, we don't do contracts."
Really?
Wow.
And so there was no contract for the first 3 years of my career.
No way.
They're like, "Oh no, we don't do contracts."
What did they? That's weird.
They're like, "It's a handshake," and I'm like, "I'm so excited to
Right.
be doing
Of
this."
course,
and I'm like, "Cool,
of course.
take it."
Right.
You know, I mean, come to find out later, like, you know, I lost a lot of money because I didn't negotiate. I didn't.
Same.
So I would say
Yeah.
a lot of this is learned.
Yeah.
It's also being really aware of your own value.
Yeah.
You know, like, I'm aware of my value. I'm never going to
hugely
ask for
valuable.
something that
Yeah.
doesn't, that I can't back up. And I often, if I'm asking, I put a lot of elevators in my contracts. Because
Explain what that is. in case
okay,
people
so
don't know.
like if I hit certain sales goals,
Right.
I get a larger percentage or a larger royalty rate, or you know, so my what I get paid elevates with how I perform. Because
because you're out there doing you're
Yeah.
doing social media. You're
I
out
will
there doing. You're working so hard.
always bet on myself.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, you want to pay me this because you don't believe I can deliver on this thing I'm saying I can deliver on? That is totally fine. If I deliver it, here's what you give me. They don't think I'm going to reach it, so they almost always agree to it.
That's good.
And I always reach it.
That's so cool. I like
And
it.
so, but that's, again, it's not being difficult, it's not being greedy, it's betting on myself.
That's great. I love the way
And
you
I'll
put
always
that.
do it because then it's up to me to succeed or fail.
Right, right. It's a
And I would
bonus.
much
It's a bonus
rather-
structure, right?
Yeah.
I would much rather it be up to me to succeed or fail than up to somebody else.
Right.
Well, and it's that power of being underestimated that I think is really awesome.
Oh,
yeah.
Right?
My
That's
favorite
good.
thing
Yeah.
in the whole world is being underestimated.
Yeah.
I can
I like
use
that.
I
For
can
days.
take being underestimated all the way to the bank. Give
Yeah.
it to me every time.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not above wearing pigtails to a meeting.
Great.
Totally.
Like, give it to me.
Yeah, right.
Like, underestimate.
Scuffy
Because I
shoes.
work with my brother. So,
Right.
you know, here I am. I'm, you know, a 30-something, sort of tattooed, like, whatevs. And then my brother is this 28-year-old, like, spiky-haired in Vans. Like, we just don't get taken seriously, and we love it.
Yeah.
Like, we'll take it every time.
Yeah.
I do.
And,
I agree.
yeah, it's the
I
best.
get that.
Yeah. It's
I
good.
get that.
That's good.
Yeah.
Betting on yourself. I like that.
Totally. I like that. Okay. Economics. Whoa. Okay, the economics of this business is kind of brutal, I think. This is what
That word scares me. Then that, I don't know.
I haven't gotten to, so maybe you guys can help me. I haven't gotten to the big companies yet. So that, you know, the Checkers and the Moda and this strata. So you get you guys at the top, right? You're like at the top fish, the pyramid, right?
Maybe I would maybe say the people who own Bernina. I mean, but
Right,
you're talking
you
about
get,
like a
like-
certain. I'm sorry.
Right,
Okay, yeah,
so
but like those owners, those
right, so
big
the-
owners. Yeah.
So the sewing machine companies, the gargantuan companies like that, that's a whole nother thing.
Mm-hmm.
But you think about the artists, the people that are sort of making their living by appearances. You get like you guys, superstars. Let's put you at the top. You guys are doing like whatever. Your economics is all good or not or good. We think you're bazillionaires, but like that's sort of the right.
Bazillion. It's like
Right.
3 bazillion, but no, I'm
Totally
kidding. No, it's
bazillion.
not.
Oh, you
it's
only
not.
make 3 bazillion?
Yeah.
But then you
Yeah.
get the people who
Oh, God.
are like making, they're fairly famous, but what they're making is on their appearances. Like teaching a class. Like when you talk to them, like they're pretty famous. Like I'm not going to say who they are, but like their economics is like, oh, well, a third is patterns I sell, and then, but most of it is teaching. And then you get the pattern people and that kind of crowd that's even under it, and they're like, somebody stole my pattern and I didn't get the $10, you know what I mean, like that whole thing. And so it's really interesting, like who's making money in this business, and
Well,
how do you make a living? I mean, is it really on personality and on teaching that's happening, or like
I want to throw in that I had a pretty good contract with F&W when I was doing Quilty and I was doing Love of Quilting.
right.
Life was good. I have no children.
Yeah.
I don't even have a house plant. I mean, it's great. So I was able to do, put some away and so forth, and it was great. But then that contract ended, but I was in that non-compete land, right? And so then I went to grad school. So like I did 17 gigs like my first year of grad school, because these are in the books years in advance. So I had to cancel a couple. There's like a guild in Omaha that like hates me. Yeah, it was too much. I mean, it almost killed me. But teaching was the way. I mean, I have not pulled down great money for several years. I mean, I actually did a pledge drive on my blog because I overdrew my checking account, paying my student loans, and I got braces. Maybe I shouldn't have done that, but I need to straighten these teeth. But yeah, I was doing okay. I mean, but I'm not on the dole from mom, and so my finances really got cut back. I could have booked more gigs. I didn't want to. I couldn't. But like, it's the perception. I mean, some people are, doing just fine and but I think, I don't know. Now it's different because now I'm editor-in-chief, although Quilt Folk is a startup, it's a startup, but I've got this documentary project that's going on. So there's going to be money there. So we're coming out of the famine, I think, into the feast.
Yourself.
Yeah.
I mean, that's part of the reinventing.
Absolutely. And I've been a freelancer forever. Like since doing poetry, writing, like all of that stuff was freelancing. So I know how to do this, but I've come out of a bit of a dry spell. So it's just interesting that I'm definitely not a bazillionaire.
You're totally a bazillionaire.
Not right now. Yeah.
Culturally. Cultural bazillionaire.
I'll take that for sure. I'll take that.
The ones that seem to do well are those that have consumables or like super brandy people, right? Like people that like they want to buy your stuff. They want that's super brand, and then consumables. So like Quilt Smart with their Mondo bag, right? That you have to buy the interface, or Paper Peeps team who has like, even though they're just plain old shapes, you're gonna buy them. Like it's not the pattern makers per se, because that's easily
there are some pattern people that are doing very well.
Hardman, right?
I mean, I know of two right off the top that are doing incredibly well.
Yeah.
Patterns by Annie and Jaybird Quilts doing very well.
That's great.
And I don't think it's a matter of what part of the industry you're in, whether you're a fabric designer, a pattern designer. I mean, in every single category, there's people who make money and people who don't.
Yeah, I totally agree. I didn't mean to sort of overgeneralize.
No.
I'm really just trying to understand.
Of course.
What's going
there's,
on
here? And I think one of the really important thing, because you brought up like people who like seem really famous, is reality versus perception. Because there's this, what is famous on the internet doesn't mean jack in your bank account. It's about what you're doing off the internet. If you can be famous on the internet and still be making money, then you're in the 1%, right? And so because I've been on both sides of that. I started out making nothing for a long time, and now I make more than that.
Right.
And but it's...
And what's that divide? What's that divide from like the struggle to not the struggle?
The tipping point, perhaps?
Yeah.
The tipping point is, I think I watch a lot of fabric designers, because that's my area of expertise, go through this sort of fame versus money versus what they're entitled to and what they deserve. And, I never felt entitled to anybody's money. I feel like I have to earn that royalty check every single time. I don't ever go into a fabric line thinking, well, people are going to buy this because I'm tula-pink. They're going to buy it because it's good fabric. And they're not going to buy it if it isn't. It doesn't matter who I am or what that means or how many followers I have on Instagram. And I think I run a real business, and I'm very focused on that business, and I'm focused on my customers and what they need. And I think one of the biggest misconceptions as a fabric designer that a lot of fabric designers have is where they fall on the hierarchy, the totem pole of what's important. Sorry, kids, you're at the bottom as a fabric designer, because the retailer is above you because they're buying your product and paying your way. The consumer is above them because the consumer is buying from the retailer, keeping the retailer in business to buy your product.
So interesting.
You're not at the top of this totem pole, but because we're the most visibly accessible, we're the most visible. We're the ones that stand out front. I mean, it's not unlike a movie set. Like, who's the most important person on a movie set? It's not necessarily the actor.
No.
And we're the actor. Right. Yeah. We're the actor.
Yes, you're right.
So the director's more important. The producer's probably more important. I mean, I don't really actually know jack about movies.
Producer
but...
probably has the most power.
Right.
I would say.
So it's, I think knowing your place is really important. In terms of, I mean, and this all leads to economics. Like, I feel like I am financially successful, not because I'm famous on Instagram within the quilting community, but because I've understood my place in the industry. I've serviced the areas that require servicing in order to create more income. I cater to my customers. I market to the consumers to keep them in business so they can keep buying my fabric. I'm very aware of where I fall in the economic hierarchy. And a lot of fabric designers, I mean, there's nothing that makes me more insane than these like crazy blog posts, whatever, that I've read about how fabric designers don't make enough money for what they do. Like, it literally makes me want to scream.
Why?
Because we make a percentage, right, of the sale of the fabric. We take no risk in producing that fabric. We're not paying for it. We're not distributing it. We're not in charge of customer acquisition. We're not in charge of...
Do most designers get any money up front, or is it just royalty checks that you're getting?
Depends.
So I mean, I have the option of money up front. I haven't taken it in years. I used to, though, when I needed it.
Yeah, right.
But it's against royalties. It's against future royalties. It's an advance on your royalties. And I took it when I needed it. I haven't needed it in a while, so I don't do that anymore. Because then when you get your royalty check, you go, oh, but it would have been this if I had taken the advance. So it was, just to give yourself a... but I remember when I got my first royalty check that would pay for my year. And what that felt like. I mean, I cried.
Yeah, huge, right?
I threw my phone across, like, because I got it in email, like my royalty statement. I looked at it. I burst into tears and threw my phone. Because I couldn't believe it. I'd been working so long for nothing. Like, not for nothing, but for very little. But so back to why I think we get paid fairly is, it's these companies are taking all the risk on our behalf. If it doesn't sell, we don't lose anything. We don't gain anything.
Right. But you don't.
But we don't lose anything.
Yeah.
And another reason in terms of economics and why Tula, it works, what you do is, I did fabric once with Springs Creative because I was interested in the history that they have. They have this huge archive, and I could go and like play in the archives, and I was like swimming through like fabric swatches. I was so happy. But I realized to have a successful fabric, I mean, I had to sell it. And I'm bad at that. I'm a creator, I'm a writer, like, great, but like, I didn't want to set up an online store. All the things that you do, I didn't want to do any of those things. But the Tula, I heard Tula, but the whole sort of thing, you don't have an online store. But in terms of being out on the road, you're
doing the marketing to sell.
Right. I didn't do any marketing. Yeah. And that's another reason why, like, it was fine, but I didn't want to do it again.
Now with Quilt Folk, do you feel differently?
I mean, yes, but it's like I'm proselytizing because this is so it's very deep for me in terms of culture changing.
The way the fabric is for Tulas.
Yes, precisely. It's, I mean, like, that's your space, and that's how you're changing culture. Right?
Yeah. I mean, and I think the only way I can sell myself so sort of shamelessly is because my brother's in charge of it.
Right.
He can say things about me that I can never say about myself. And that's a really important part. And I would say that I didn't really start seeing some serious momentum until my brother came on.
Yeah.
My art didn't change, but the delivery system changed because he can say things I can't say. Like, you know, he can say, like, oh, look at this award we won for the best thing ever. Like, I can't say that, like, without feeling weird about it or bashful or braggy or whatever, you know, but he can say those things in a way that I can't. And you know, I mean, that's a really important part of it. It's crucial.
You must have it. Right?
And you do have to sell it. I mean, because here's the thing. As a fabric designer, you're contracted to a company. So you don't work for that company. They're a partner, right? They're a licensing partner. Right. They essentially lease a part of my copyright, and it's very specific. Like, they're leasing the copyright to my design to print on 44, 45-inch wide cotton.
For a specific time.
For a specific period of time. At the end of that time, that copyright reverts back to me.
This must be catnip for you right now, Elizabeth.
Yeah, so that copyright reverts back to me. So I say, I'm running the biggest con job in history. I make nothing, I sell nothing. And because I own everything at the end.
Are you licensing those designs in other contexts as well besides the fabric?
Sort of. I mean, I do ribbons and I do, but fabric's my bread and butter.
Pieces, you do stuff with them.
Yeah.
Too, right.
Yeah. Fabric, I would say, is about 70% of my income. It's the main portion of my income. But so I work with these companies. They have a marketing department, and they have people in charge of different things. You know, they have a company. They have salespeople. They have all that. They have all the sales reps, all the marketing people. They have 40 fabric lines to sell. What are the odds that they're going to represent my fabric the way I think it should be represented? You can't expect that. They don't know it. They're looking at swatch after swatch after swatch from all these designers. They're never going to be as committed to what I've done as I am.
Do you think that because of sort of who you are and the social media presence, that you're the squeaky wheel, that it pushes them to sell your stuff more? Because
they sell it because they can. So what I'm doing is, and this is sort of background stuff that maybe a lot of people don't know, but when I turn in a fabric line, I don't just turn in a fabric line. I turn in a marketing plan. I turn in advertisements for all variations and sizes. I turn in logos. I turn in inspiration statements.
This is what I mean.
I give the sales reps talking points, a list of talking points. I give you every fabric before this fabric line that I've ever designed that's still in the warehouse that will coordinate with this line.
That's amazing.
I give you as much as I possibly can, because if I can put in the sales reps' hands who get a suitcase full of cards that have fabrics on them, fabric lines on them, the more I can give them the more I can take out of their hands, the more eager they are to sell it, because it's the one thing they don't have to think about. You know, so they have all of these fabrics and they go, oh, this Tula one.
They have something to say
They have
about
something
it.
to say about it. They have
It's good
something to
content.
show.
Interesting.
Here's a whole bunch of quilts you can make, and here's how you can manage those quilts and sell those quilts. Here's a sign-up sheet for a trunk show. You know?
So, and I have a question for you in a second, Mary. But how much of your time then, like, take us through, like, you do a fabric line. What percentage is the design part versus putting the stuff together?
I spend 20% of my time designing.
And then the rest?
The rest is all selling.
It's amazing, right?
Traveling. Lecturing. Selling.
Now, is the fabric line paying for your travel, or are you paying for that travel?
The person inviting me pays for the travel.
Inviting you pays for the travel.
Yeah, I don't pay for my own travel.
Yeah,
Neither do I.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't. You can't. You just
can't. Yeah.
That's the burden.
That's not going to happen.
But
That's the burden.
But so for it, but you
It's just
have
not.
to.
I mean,
you
it's
also have-
professionalization. Like,
Yeah.
that's part of it. It's like you're worth. I mean, that's the feminist moment. I'm like, I'm not paying. Like, you know, like I would never do that.
No,
Like,
I mean you
don't know.
don't.
It's just ridiculous.
And you know, there's a really important part of that is, you know, I know what a day is worth to me.
Yeah.
And that's what I charge. And if somebody has a problem with what I'm charging as my day rate, I'll give you a rundown of what that's paying for. Right. It's very specific. Nothing is arbitrary.
All you've got is your time. Right?
Yeah, and
like,
I know what I can make in a day in my studio, and if I can't make that on the road, then there's no point in me being on the road.
Right.
But I'm also like I try to be really conscious of the shop's cost in bringing me, because I will say I'm more expensive than most. But I, again, know what my value is.
Yeah,
like, I know the crowd I can draw. I know and I will
with
give
that little
them,
shop, you're going to change their day, their whole world is going to be different if you come.
I mean, I can make dedicated customers out of their customers, and I know what that's worth over the long haul. And, I think there's this sort of, people are ashamed to talk about money or success.
Usually.
And I think that's too bad, because if we all sort of knew more about how we all got to where we are, and that's why those blog posts about how fabric designers don't make enough money and it's a travesty and all of this stuff, it's like, what you're telling me, if you're the one being interviewed for this blog post, this article about how you're a fabric designer anonymously, and you're saying that fabric designers don't make enough money, what it's telling me is you're not good enough at your job.
That's really interesting.
And you don't understand what your job is.
Well, and the flip side of that is I've just seen an incredible opportunity in this field. It's a field where people come in and then suddenly are these incredible things. Like, it's open in ways that a lot of other fields aren't. And that's been interesting, I think, too. You know, that you can be like someone who's like, I started sewing 2 years ago and now suddenly I'm doing all these crazy things, right? Narrative.
Oh.
Let's talk about narrative.
Okay.
Narrative is super important. You're all about the narrative. And so are you. So both of you are. And so I found that kind of an interesting connection of like the role of narrative, because I don't think people think of either of you as like narrative would be the most important thing. But tell me, what about narrative is important?
Well, you know, having a blog, it's like I'm still I sort of like wince when I tell someone, you know, I have a blog, because in the world of writing, I don't know why, this probably comes from my parents, both of whom are aspiring novelists, but like this idea that like the novel, the great American novel is like the pinnacle of human achievement in terms of writing,
and a picket fence,
and yes,
and
like,
there's like we have certain things in our culture that we believe is important.
But like I started blogging, 15 years ago or something like that, and I have an instant engaged audience. A woman in South Carolina was like, Mary, I don't read blogs. I don't even really know what a blog is, but I love yours and I read it every day. So great, right? So it's like I have this instant sort of, connection with these people, and I'm writing every day. It's doing scales. It's like sketching every day. Perhaps it's like playing the violin every day. I'm a writer to my core, right? So the narrative is very important. So I have the blog, and it helps people to know me. And we were saying earlier, I mean, the thing that I clung to in the beginning of all this, because I didn't know how to sew, I learned how to sew on national television in front of everyone. It was horrifying, which is why I love The Beginner so much, because I'll never forget how bad it was. But I was myself. I never pretended to know something I didn't know. So that's sort of a narrative arc too. If you watch me on Love of Quilting the whole time, you speed up the tape.
When did you start blogging? Was it
No, it was before. It was like 05.
So you were blogging before you were quilting.
Yeah. So they were on the illness journey. They were on the quilting journey, like all this stuff. But it's a very specific. I don't tell them everything. My diary has many other things that are not on the blog. It would not be appropriate for a lot of reasons. I mean, but people feel like they know Tula. They feel like they know me because they do. Because we really are out there all the time.
You're okay with like the stuff that. We're talking about the concept of authentic self. I'm all like, so one person, what did I say? So early on, somebody started interviewing me, and they're like, "You don't cut things out, and like weird things happen, and like why don't you do more editing?" And I was like, "Well, because I don't really want to."
Yeah, it's a lot of work.
It's like a lot of work.
Yeah,
and I don't really care if like the kid comes in or whatever, or the cat knocks something over.
It's authentic.
It's authentic, and that's kind of what I see with both of you too. That you have a professional self out there, like you're famous people, but you also are very authentic in how you sort of approach that.
Well, I think, and this speaks to a larger, you mentioned wondering about culture, like the quilting culture, and I just, want to say that like we are ready. You talk about tipping points. Everything is about to change, and you heard it here first. I mean, the entire structure of the quilt industry, most people do not do what Tula has done because they're not doing the back end work that it takes a lot,
and they wish they could, but they don't even know how to start.
Well, and it's like, well, they're not faulted for that in many ways, but because of that visibility, you think you can do these things. You think people are making all this money, and they're not. The people who are doing all this extra work. So the quilt. Great American Quilt Revival happened 80s and 90s. That this industry is worth 3.5, sometimes 4. But lately, $3.5 billion. Okay,
3.7
online,
is the last number
3.7. It hovered. It hasn't grown in a long time. Okay, so it's contracting or it's stagnant. You could say. Online dating, that industry is worth $3 billion. So we are far ahead in terms of So, and I'm in both worlds, which is really fun. Still, okay, Cupid and sewing. So this industry did not exist. Yeah. In 1981.
I know.
It didn't exist. I think the first market was in 1981. So this thing has exploded.
It's so bizarre.
Yes, it's a baby, and it is not secure because all of these the glutted marketplace with all of these books and all of these fabric lines,
and all the rulers, and
all the stuff.
Right?
Okay, so quilters have grown. It's a fast food culture, and it's been a fast food culture in terms of notions and this, and there's too much stuff that they don't need. So it's not working anymore. And the magazines, and I know the publishing side of all this, that's way more my zone. So these magazines over the years, I mean, when they closed Quilter's newsletter, a piece of my heart died. Bonnie Lehman started that magazine from her kitchen table, and no one was watching the magazine, and they folded it. So anyway, but the reasons these magazines, they're closing every day. Have you noticed? Many all the time are shuttering, and Quilt Folk is galloping away. Right. So the reason that these magazines have begun to fail terribly, I mean, they're really breaking down, is because the only way to compete with the internet is to put more patterns in the magazines, because because they have to sell all these fabric lines and all these designers, right? And so they put more patterns, and they also put more ads. All of the content, the context, historical, stripped it away, because you can't sell the latest notion with an article about the history of the Drunkard's Path pattern. You have to take it away, and you literally shrink the magazine. Okay, so a magazine like Quilt Folk, these certain projects that different people are doing, they are putting the content and the history and the culture back in. And if we don't do that, if people don't change, and this cultural zeitgeist does not shift, quilting is not as secure as people think it is. Oh, it's this billion-dollar industry. There's 16 to 20 million quilters in America. In the 40s and 50s and 60s, people were not quilting, and people will not quilt again if we don't do something.
Do you feel like it became ahistorical as a consumerism
Absolutely.
and capitalism arose, that you get this kind of weird...
Yes, and
weirdness.
Quilts are the reason we're here having this conversation and able to do it. They occupy the strangest space in terms of marks and capital, the capital, because they are priceless objects. But if you put a price on them, it's crappy. Because we don't know how to value quilts until they're old or until whatever. It's a very, very bizarre kind of object, and it is you cannot put a price on it, and as soon as you do, it devalues it. And so it's very interesting.
Yeah, it is. And I would say the same thing is happening on the fabric side.
Mm-hmm.
I think what I see happening is there was a designer boom. So anybody who had a blog or a Twitter account got a fabric line for a minute. And all these companies were just taking on designers like crazy. I mean, the rosters, a design company's roster used to be 15 designers. All of a sudden it was 80. Wow. Every company had 80 designers, and there were all these one and done fabric lines. So they would do a fabric line, it wouldn't sell, they wouldn't do another one.
Yeah, I did it. I mean, I tried it. I was this is tough. I'm out.
Yeah, so many. And I think that's why, you say magazines in general are failing, but Quilt Folk's taking off.
There's no
people
ads.
are why? And I get that question a lot too, even from my own company.
Right.
Why are you doing so well when so many others aren't?
Yeah.
And I mean, we see a 14 to 18% increase every single season.
Your line.
My line.
It's crazy.
Consistently for 8 years now.
That's awesome.
That statistic has held, and
that's amazing. You're amazing.
And
it's really,
but
really
I know
amazing.
that statistic. Right. That's the important thing.
You know
is that I know that because I track it, because I'm aware of my business, right? But so, and what that did for me was really scary because the shops who buy my product have a certain amount of money to spend. And when something comes out and it's really big on the internet, which makes me sound 100 years old, but it's really big on social media and everybody's like, ah, and they get it into their store. And this really happens with big hoopla, new modern designers or whatever. So a shop goes, okay, everyone on the internet's talking about this, so I have to bring it into my shop, but it's untested. No one knows what it's going to do yet, but it's so big on the internet that clearly it's going to do well. And so they bring it into the shop. It doesn't do well. It doesn't sell. And then when I go to sell them my line later, they go, no, we can't sell modern in our shop.
Right.
And so I've been working uphill against this designer boom.
That's really interesting.
Because,
because you're a totally different thing. Like that's
it's
not
totally
right.
different thing. Right. But so shops that are traditionally like, you can't survive on modern shops alone. You have to be in traditional quilt shops. You have to be.
But most of the buying power is within the demographic. It is. They have more money, a lot of them.
That in mind, that it needs to be in a traditional shop as well?
I know that it needs to be in a traditional shop, and so the way I service that is by making really traditional quilts to put my work in, which is actually what I love anyway, so it's like not like a hardship. Yeah. I mean, there's nothing I love more in the world than using my fabric to make a laundry basket quilts pattern.
Yeah.
Like this very traditional, so beautiful, she has this amazing aesthetic. She's one of my favorite pattern designers.
Edita Setaria.
Yeah, Edita. And she's just delightful anyway. But I love taking my fabric and putting them in her patterns because it's really unexpected. But it gives a traditional quilter access, like a way into my fabric. And what I hear over and over again is, I would say the majority of my fan base, if you will, or my consumer base, are traditional quilters, more so than modern quilters. Because they have made all these quilts their whole life. They have a room full of brown fabric. And they want to make quilts for their grandkids and their great-grandkids and weddings, and no one wants them. And they're like, we don't want your brown quilt, Grandma. And then they see
I do, Grandma.
And then I told that to Cheryl Sloboda, because she does all this electric quilt stuff. And I'm like, you should just be going for the make something cool for your grandkids. That's cool.
And so what happens is they win a fat quarter bundle in a raffle of my fabric. Like, they don't buy it on purpose, right? They win a fat quarter bundle in a raffle, and they're like, well, I got to do something with this, because they're from a generation where we don't waste fabric, unlike today where we're just super into it. And then all of a sudden their grandkids and their kids are like, well, I want that one. No, I want that one. And then they're like, oh. So then they buy more of my fabric, and then their kids want it again. And then they start to see that what I'm doing, aside from color, isn't as different from what they're used to as they think, because my main source of inspiration is William Morris, which is what they have in their stash. And then they start to see that...
Very much so, right?
Yes, very much so. I mean, even my tattoos are all William Morris. But they're, that's where I come from. It's color is the only thing that separates me.
Right.
Like, my fabric is very much not modern.
It's really interesting.
But the color makes people think it is. And so people are always surprised when I go to do a lecture. They think it's going to be a room of 20-year-olds. And it never is. And the people that are most excited to see me are never... They're older. They're older. They're always older. I'm a
because of the
and they're
TV
just
show.
Beyond.
And I'm really a 75-year-old woman in a 30-something-year-old body. I mean, that's really who I am as a human. So it makes sense, and I see my equal there. So
I love this
I'm going to grab your fabric for just a second, because I want to ask you some questions.
Great. Tula.
Yes. Ma'am.
Tell me. Where do you get your inspiration?
I will go out with you.
Okay, good.
I'm sorry,
we're dating. Tula and I are dating.
Yeah.
Let's break the podcast internet.
All right, here's the box. Oh, I have one more.
What was I going to say? I don't know. Oh, God. Ask me something.
Are you guys trying to figure out what to ask?
Will you go out with me?
Yes,
No.
I will. Yes.
You make out with me,
Absolutely.
please, Mary?
Yes, let's make out.
So
Take my hat.
I did have
Take
a
my hat
follow-up narrative question for you. It's because we watched your poetry.
Oh, yeah.
Which is really awesome.
Yeah, it's out there.
It's really out there, right? Mm-hmm. So, quilting persona, poetry persona, same persona, or do you feel like it's different? Are you cool with do you know what I'm saying?
Well,
and,
I was...
And the kid, she was just like, Mom, that's what you're supposed to do with the poetry. Of course she's doing that. It was very interesting. That would be wrong if she didn't do it. You know what
Before I was a writer before I was a quilter. Yeah. That was happening first. And that will be who I am first always. I'm a writer first. So I will just say that, in my former life before all this quilting stuff, I was a performance artist in Chicago. I mean, I was making my living doing the Too Much Light Makes the Baby Go Blind, the Neo-Futurists and everything. And so, but all of those things, we were talking about this, all of the things that I've done in my life, and it wasn't theater, I wasn't an actress, I was a performer, and I was writing and performing this stuff professionally. So writing, poetry. I was a solo performer, so I fear no crowd. I mean, never. I am more at ease up on a stage than I am in normal life because I have a role. And you have a role, and there's this very clear dividing line, and I'm totally happy, right? You probably
feel the same way. Yeah.
So all of the things that I did, the writing, the performance, and I was ready to be an editor when I was the editor of Quilty. I had never been an editor before, but I was a writer, and I've always been into fashion, and so I know visual stuff pretty well. So I don't write poetry much, but I did get my master's degree in writing recently from the School of the Art Institute.
Did you have a master's thesis you had to do?
I did.
What did you do?
I put everything that I had written and published or otherwise turned in, completed, in 2 years into a single manuscript.
Really?
And it was 1,500 pages.
Oh my gosh. And
every blog entry, every essay.
What are you going to do with that? That's
nothing.
So cool.
It's a record. It was almost performative having that, and I had to make 2 copies. Yeah, but it was this thick, and every Quilt Folk article, everything, and that's the writer I am, and that's, by the way, if anybody wants to go study writing, no one can teach you how to write, but if you want to learn how you write, then you have a chance to get better. Because you can't write like anybody else. Same thing with art. It's like, can you really teach somebody how to be an artist? I don't know, but if you learn who you are as an artist, you have that hand, right? And if you learn how you write, you've got a chance.
I always felt like art school, you can't teach somebody to have artistic talent.
No, or writing talent.
But art school for me was like 4 years of learning how to communicate verbally what I was doing visually. Yeah. It was like learning how to talk about my work.
Right.
Was what art school was.
Yeah.
To a large degree.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel like keep going on, you guys keep, and I want to do this part. Do you feel like there should be more? I know that there's the quilting masters at Nebraska. There's a couple of things, but do you feel like there should be more space for quilting artistry? Like it's like should it be more professionalized in terms of
formal
the career
education
path?
like that? Well, I think my prediction is that textiles are about to, we're in this cultural moment, this tipping point in quilting. I think in the broader art world, we're about to enter into the age of the textile because and it's been ghettoized for years because it's women's work and it's cloth and it's all this. No medium is more intersectional, is more global, is more ancient than textiles. And by the way, the root of textiles is text. Course. So all of this makes sense.
I was so I love that you had stories behind your quilt, behind your fabric, and your narrative. And narrative is so important. And the quilt folk is about narrative and about stories.
Because what's been going on isn't enough anymore.
So cool.
It's not enough anymore in the industry, and that's why Tula stays in there. So the one thing I want to say is that you asked about formal education or I could teach a semester long class on quilt history. Totally. Absolutely, it doesn't exist yet.
A semester wouldn't be long
enough. Right. And so could you formalize
what is doing? I feel like
it really is.
I feel like that's what it's doing in a way that people can accept it into their lives finally. Because I think there needs to be contextualization. I mean, like when the whole Modern Quilt Guild started, and all these quilters who've been around forever were so outraged that they were like claiming invention of things that had been around for so long, and that education caught up, and it's catching up. I mean. I remember I was just at, not just, like last year. I don't know. I have no sense of time.
It's a blur.
But it's all a blur. But I was at QuiltCon, the first and only one I've ever been to. And it just never works out for me schedule-wise somehow. But, and I was in a booth doing a book signing and staring at a quilt in the exhibit. It was a beautiful Irish chain quilt. And I was like, that's a lovely interpretation of it. I mean, it was literally an Irish chain quilt. But they had done it. It had sort of gradated, and I don't want to talk about it too much because I'm about to be mean about it.
Okay.
So I don't want to identify the person. Right. Anyway, and I was looking at it, and I thought this is really lovely. And finally, from looking at it all weekend, I walked up and read the like little placard next to it. The maker had no idea it was an Irish chain quilt. It was this like dissertation on mathematics about this, that, and the other thing, and I was just like, just let it be an Irish chain quilt. But there was no context, like there was no historical
and this
context.
Is
they didn't know.
That's right.
Here's the thing. You're absolutely right, and it can be sort of galling. But it's just like the feminist thing, because the old school feminists, right? They look at these kids today, and it's like, you gave us this world. The old school feminists built the world for us to like be. It's like parents who get mad because their kids are on phones. You're on your phone. So just one thing about these, the quilters who were like enraged, because these moderns thought they invented everything. They didn't teach us.
Right.
You never taught us.
Right.
You stripped away the context and the history. You
By
gave us
through commercialization. Yes,
and so
I
it's
agree,
all the historical articles were gone by the time the moderns started quilting.
Yeah.
So how can you expect it?
Yeah.
So now we have to put that. Everybody's been living on
hyper-capitalism.
Splenda,
Well,
and now we have to put
Yeah.
the sugar and the cream back in.
And it's so funny because the one thing I was thinking about that Irish Train quote while I was reading this, I mean, I wasn't like mad at it or anything.
No, it's curious.
It was just it was like, you know what I feel bad about? I feel bad that this person went through so much to get here when that work had already been done for them.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they could have made a beautiful quilt without having to go through that much, like, intellectual trauma to get there.
And perhaps even more tragic is that they don't realize that they're part of this legacy, this long line of, the greatest creative endeavor America has ever engaged in, which is quilt making, in my opinion.
Yeah,
jazz is pretty good. But
I feel like we're moving into this, and this is a conversation. So a lot of my friends, I went to art school. I started art in an academic way. So did most of my friends. Yeah. I mean, you tend to like create communities in different schools in different ways. One of my best friends studied sculpture at Cornell. One of my other best friends studied, illustration at RISD. And we all went to art schools, and we all kind of know each other, and we're still friends. And we have these, and what I've noticed is this real trend. So craft has always been far below art. And there's this really like, I'm tired of apologizing for making things well. And craft is and art has become ballooned into this thing that's almost so removed from real life. Like there's like the gallery system of art, where art is shown in a gallery on a white wall, and you look at it from a specific distance, and like there's so many rules around it. That the human element is so far removed from actual art, and it's not of the people.
That's really interesting.
This is what I mean by textiles are about to take over.
It's not like art is not viewed as being part of the human condition anymore. Craft is. And so I see with myself and a lot of my friends sort of craft becoming more elevated than art, because
the hierarchy is changing.
Art has become with a capital A has become for the 1%.
Well, and it also got all weird. So with all the is it Damien Hirst?
Damien Hirst,
they kind of did it to themselves, right? It exploded in this super weird way that people were just like, whatever, right? So. And then your industry is just grown, and the skill and the artistry. Yeah. So you get this kind of fakeness. I'm not saying that.
Right. No. We're making very general statements here.
Sure.
Don't hate us.
I'm just saying that there's,
But there will always be quilters who do not want to identify as artists, maybe because they don't have, the confidence, and they should be artists. But there are some people who believe the quilts in the museum in Lincoln, Nebraska should only be there if they were made by trained studio artists with MFA. I don't think so. I think that's wrong.
Really?
Oh,
yeah,
I'll tell you a story.
Okay, yeah.
Anyway,
all right, let's look at your fabric.
Yeah.
All right, so we're opening a box of fabric. Okay, so this is, what this is.
I do, because I made it.
Yeah, you totally made that. Okay, I got a lot of worries. I got a lot of issues. I got some questions. I got some personal worries. Not in a bad way, but you're here, so I'm gonna
God. Everything turned here at the end.
One of the things is intellectual property. So let's take a look at one of the fabrics. So gorgeous. Your fabrics are just you just want to hang them on the
wall. They're yummy.
They
juicy.
Are yummy. So
they're
that's
juicy.
part of the problem with them, right? So in a good way, right? Because they're very scary. Like the idea to cut it.
Too? To
make things,
I'm like, what is terrifying?
Right?
Like, I don't even have a bat in that
they're
one.
They're so beyond beautiful. You just think I can only do harm to them.
Can I eat a praline? Well, I will not eat it near the stuff.
So do you feel like that's maybe it's just me, because I'm a very average quilter.
A lot of people feel that way about my fabric. I mean, that's a thing. I say
get an extra yard.
I say the best way to save a piece of fabric is to use it.
Put it in a quilt.
Is to put it in a quilt. That's the best way to preserve it, because how much enjoyment do you get out of a piece of fabric when it's in a box on a shelf?
It's true, and you can't see them all.
And I have some artists, some fabric designers that I love in the way that some people love me and my work. And I finally got to a place where I'm like, I never see this fabric because it's hidden away, because it's saved.
Right.
And so I started
save
taking
your fabric all the time.
Yes,
they're
they
crazy
do.
about it, right?
They do. And so I started taking those fabrics that I feel that way about and putting them into quilts, and now I see them all the time.
And it's
and I've really realized the value in that. The best way to preserve a fabric is to put it into a quilt.
Okay.
I say the same thing.
Yeah. I love it. Okay. So that makes me feel a bit better.
Good.
And then strategizing on using your fabric. So people, if you have not seen tula-pink's fabric, go look at it, because it's insanely detailed and beautiful. And again, do you fussy cut it? Do you just cut it in strips? Do you what do you do? You do all of it, right?
Yeah, I do all of it.
Right? Some of it's, I
love to fussy cut, because really, I'm an illustrator.
You're an illustrator
by trade, so I want to draw a picture.
Flowers and the birds.
And I try to give you enough so that if you fussy cut one thing, what's left behind isn't.
So you're also
isn't nothing.
So one of my quilting army people, because they're awesome, brought back your all-star pack for me, which is like I couldn't believe they did that. That's a huge thing. It's very expensive.
Can't believe they got one.
Yeah. They did, right? I mean, in Paducah.
Paducah, in Quilt Market.
No, they went in Quilt Market.
That was a mob scene. That was crazy.
And what was so cool about the pack, if you can get it, is you were so clever. You are very clever, because you made a very simple. The pattern is really cool. And we've done part of it. We did most of it. Didn't take very long to do it. But then there was tons of fabric left over, and if you didn't put it on the back or whatever. And that was just so clever. I mean, it was just like all of it, like the experience of doing it was like amazing. Like I like experiencing things. Like I could do the pattern. I could put so that. I just want to tell you,
everything I
you're
put
just
out,
amazing.
I make myself. I make all my own samples because that is a crucial part of learning how your fabrics work. I can always tell a fabric designer who doesn't sew.
Because they have.
After 5 minutes of trying to work with it, I can tell if they sew or not. It's very clear. So I think working with the fabric is crucial, and I don't think anybody really knows how deep into the thought process I go on every fabric I put out.
Usually, right?
I go so deep. Like, I think about fussy cutting. So if you fussy cut that bird in this one print that we're looking at called Tail Feather, if you fussy cut that bird and then you have all this fabric with no bird in it, you can still fussy cut 3 different flowers.
It's amazing, right?
Yeah.
Amazing.
And if you cut this into just 2-inch squares randomly, every single piece should have the same proportion of color in it.
That's incredible.
Wow.
And that's the difference between
because I'm a quilter.
Because you're a quilter and you're an artist. I mean, that you're also thinking about this in sort of more than just like I'm putting a bunch of birds on a thing. And
I'm never happier when I'm straddling the wall between art and commerce.
So cool.
Like strategy. That's what I love.
Kanye West said in an interview, he's like, I'm a product guy. And I was like, yeah, I like commercial art is where I'm happy too. I want to make art for people to embrace.
Does, right?
And my blog and just everything that I've done.
Yes.
I like to make magazines because magazines are what I love, and it is instant and it's a product. I don't want to be up in in an attic toiling away on some novel or poetry anymore. But even the poetry that I used to do, it was slam. It was performance poetry. I'm not making a little literary magazine thing that no one will read. Yeah. I want art for the people. I want to connect. Cool. I must connect. And we both are doing things that connect. Yeah.
Well, and I have to give a plug for Quilty because I've been watching them.
Oh, yeah.
And they're
good old
great.
Quilty.
Right?
Yeah. We made that show for 5 years.
On YouTube, and they're great. And I saw one with Rebecca, your sister, and you guys were so funny.
Yeah, she's
so
great. Yeah, Quilty was good. People come up. There was a bit of a tribe, and I was never an owner of Quilty. I pitched that work to F&W, so I don't own Spoolie, and I don't own Quilty, and that was an experience that I learned. But yeah, Quilty was weird. You see the the mary-fons quilt thing in Quilty because it was strange. They allowed me, I can't believe they allowed me to put a few antique quilts in there. Before it was like, I don't know, it was like I snuck them in somehow, but Quilty was strange. I drew all the illustrations badly, but like it was a strange thing and people responded to it because it was different. And they still do.
The show is still on YouTube and it's so insanely great.
It's fun.
Okay. I have another worry.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, we did the top. I might show it to you, but I'm not really good at quilting.
Okay.
Which is, so I don't show people quilting because I feel like that's not what I do. I'm just a law professor that likes to quilt.
Right.
I'm not supposed to be good at it.
Right.
But the kid wasn't really into the white side of it. So we did black on both sides.
Okay.
And my emotional stress of the fact, like, first of all, I'm conflicted because some people are like, you made this pattern. And like, I think about cross stitch. Like, you know what you're doing. Like, the fact that I did like 2 black sides is stressing me out.
Oh my gosh.
But do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because like you spend a lot of time. Like, who am I to change it? So
yeah,
how do
but
people feel like that?
I really believe this. So I don't sell a lot of patterns. I read books. Yeah, but
I've got one of yours here.
but that's really just like because people sort of need me to in a way.
Right.
But most of the patterns that I design, I give away for free because I feel like. And of course, I can say this because my business isn't in pattern writing, but I feel like the person,
some pattern people that that you should privilege the cost of the pattern, like because you give away not just you, but the people give them away.
Yes,
that then people expect them to be free, and that upsets them because their income is all messed up.
But I believe that the quilt is owned by the maker, not the designer.
Right. You don't care whether I change it.
I don't care whether you change it.
I know that's probably true.
I don't care that you change it because it's your quilt and it's not my right to care that you change it.
So that's part of the process. You're giving me a license, it's implied that you're giving me a derivative work license to create a work for my personal use in any way you want for this quilt. Now, let's say I took that quilt and I sold it on Etsy. How would you feel about that? Do you care if people do that or not?
Okay, so this is a really important topic that a lot of people want to know. So, if you make something of your own design but use my fabric, you have purchased the fabric,
right?
So I have been paid for that fabric.
That's right.
So I mean, this is the legal. Legally, this is how it works.
Usually, it's at full price. They're not even getting wholesale.
Right.
Right. So you're like,
I mean, it doesn't matter.
Out.
I get paid the same no matter what, wholesale or full price, because I get paid off the wholesale. And I don't get paid again when it sells retail.
So you don't care. So I make this into hats and
you make that. You take that fabric that you bought at your local shop, or you have a business and you bought it from Free Spirit wholesale, and you make hats out of it and you sell them.
You okay that I say it's from tula-pink fabric? That I name your name?
That you say I use tula-pink fabric?
Yeah,
if you're
cool
specific
with nominative
about
use.
It. Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Now, can you take one of my patterns?
Yes, your circle pattern, right?
Yeah, my circle pattern.
Okay.
Let's say, and you made it.
I did make it.
You bought it. You made it.
Some ladies helped me make.
Okay, but somebody made it.
Somebody made it.
And you sell that quilt. I mean, this is a gray area, sort of. Like, I feel like you purchased the kit, you bought the kit. What you're selling is your services as a seamstress.
Interesting.
Now, if you take that pattern that came with the kit and you make 10 more and sell it, now we've crossed a line.
Okay, wait. So tell me why? Because aren't they still buying your fabric?
Well, if you buy 10 more kits, or if you buy my...
Like, I still have more fabric. Could I make a second one and sell it? Would you be okay with that? As long as you're getting the fabric?
I don't think ethically that's right to do.
Why?
Because, I mean, it's less about the fabric. Because at that point, the pattern and the fabric are two different things.
Yeah.
When you buy my fabric and make something of your own design... You're selling your own design, but you need a raw material, which is what I sell. Fine. Right. So I always tell people, if you make something out of one of my patterns, like a paid pattern, let's say like my butterfly pattern, right? I have one pattern that I sell because it's too intense to give away for free.
Yeah.
It was way too much work to give away for free. Right. So I have this one pattern, this butterfly pattern. if you buy the pattern and make 10 quilts from that pattern and sell 10 butterfly quilts out of any fabric, I don't care what you use. I don't feel like that's right.
A lot of people feel that way. So
Yes,
what would you want them to do instead?
I say that if you made 10 butterfly quilts and sold 10 butterfly quilts with 10 butterfly patterns.
Now, could they get a license from you to be selling?
No.
No. So this is an interesting market failure.
Because I feel like if you're buying the pattern every time you sell the quilt, I'm being paid for that intellectual property.
Right.
So, because what you're doing is you're selling your skills as a sewist. So you're basically being hired to make the quilt. Well, that's fine. Every time someone buys the pattern, I'm assuming they're making the quilt.
But you believe, not in a bad way, but you're saying that it's a one-time, like you can
one-time use.
One-time use, like let's say I want to make a bunch of circles.
You can't continue to profit off my intellectual property indefinitely and just pay me $10 for it.
That's right. That's
no.
Right.
That's interesting.
But if you pay me $10 every time,
right. It's like buying the book for the class. Like
you
can't get a PDF.
You can't make copies out of the book.
Now let's say I want to make circles. I make a bunch of circle quilts, and I'm just like crazy obsessed with circle quilts. You're cool with that? Me using that pattern that you did just for my personal use over and over again.
Just to keep making it over and over in like a million different
fabrics. It's like the only thing I can do,
I mean,
right?
if you're that crazy, go for it.
Well, we've got some weird people. Not weird. I'm sorry, guys. You're not weird. A little bit weird.
Quilters are a little weird. I'm weird. I'm weird.
Totally.
I'll take it.
So they're way into the Gypsy Wife quilt, the Jen Kingwell one.
Yes.
And they make them over and over and over again. Like they'll have to make another one, and we're doing it. We're doing a sew along with that because the group kind of decided to do it without my. I'm like,
I
okay,
love
whatever.
Jen Kingwell and everything.
Her stuff is really
talented.
interesting. But again, these are people that are just doing it over and over again because they're obsessed with it. That's different than if I'm selling it.
It doesn't.
It doesn't
become a problem until money's involved.
And it doesn't really matter how much money's involved. If like you don't care, it's not like if you're making $50,000, you're like anytime there's money.
And so what I tell people is if you want to make and sell 10 butterfly quilts, buy 10 patterns. And you're covered. Like, you're covered legally. It's not about how much money I'm getting. I don't want a percentage of what you're doing. You're doing all the work. Right, but I still need to be paid for my intellectual property.
Because you're licensing it that. And you set the license as commercial or non-commercial. But if that paying for that pattern allows you to do the
because I feel like if you buy the pattern, I've been paid for the work I did. And this is the price that I set up as what I thought I determined was value for what I'm delivering.
Now, do you put any kind of copyright notice? I didn't look. So
yes.
What's your copyright notice? Like, do you just put a straight copyright notice, or do you put a no commercial use?
Yeah, I put like a for personal use only. But really, if you buy the pattern and you make it, and then you selling your services as a sewist, right? I mean, like, I would be kind of bummed if I woke up and there were 100 butterfly quilts for sale on Etsy, and my pattern numbers hadn't changed at all.
Also, the amount of work to make the butterfly quilt is ridiculous, right?
It's a huge amount of work.
So it's not worth it. I mean, that's the deterrent, is that there's not worth it to make it.
Not really.
I mean, the circle one you could do in a weekend.
You can't really recoup enough money for your time, and that's quilting, though. That's what, Mary was saying. Once you put a price on it, it devalues it because it's never enough.
Okay, so let me ask you about this one. Okay, this is my kids, so we got
amazing,
this, right? We did.
Yeah.
Then we kind of felt, it's all good. So what's interesting about this one? So this is 100 modern quilt blocks, and this is when did you do this?
A few years ago.
Yeah, and there's another, the Gnome Angel. Do you know the Gnome Angel? Yeah. They're gonna do.
She's done 1 million sew-alongs for that book.
Yeah, they're doing it again, right?
Yeah.
So doing all 100 blocks. So. Tell me, this is really interesting, right? Because there's no directions, really.
No, there's no words.
There's no words. So tell me about that part of it.
So this is how I make quilts.
Mm-hmm. This is so cool.
I make quilts with a picture and numbers.
And did you draw, these are drawings?
I hand drew every single block.
Because now I saw from lunch, then I was like, wait a second.
I hand drew every single block.
It's a good book. I don't have many block books like that, but I have that one.
Well, I mean, so...
It's really cool.
So with this book... I was like, this is how I make quilts. Cool. I make quilts by looking at a picture of how the pieces go together. Like, you put this square next to this square next to this rectangle. And as long as I know what size to cut those pieces, I just line them up on the table and then I sew them together.
Right.
I wonder if other people sew this way. Like, because I feel like there's a very fine line between not enough information and too much information.
Yeah, I hate directions.
Too much information can really make it hard to follow.
Yes.
Same as not enough information.
Yeah.
And there's a few pattern writers out there that I think find that balance really well. I don't fancy myself actually like a prolific pattern writer.
Yeah.
I know how to make a quilt. But telling somebody how to make a quilt is a very different thing.
Yeah.
And I, this is how I make quilts, is with a picture and a list of numbers on sizes to cut. I mean, I showed you my sketchbook at lunch. Like, this is how I make quilts.
Right. It was very cool.
And so the challenge with this book was coming up with patterns that didn't require, like block patterns that didn't require extra words.
That's really interesting.
So I couldn't change the technique. I couldn't say now use a template or do applique because now I need instructions. How do you do applique? How do you use the template? What do you cut it out of?
Right.
So it had to be straight rotary cut machine sew blocks, every single one of them. And so coming up with 100 variations on how to cut something with a ruler and a rotary cutter. And, they've often asked for a follow-up to that book because it was so successful. And I was like, I can't come up with 100 more ways to do this. Like, it was like torture to come up with these 100. Like,
very funny.
and the book is still very much, I don't think my royalty on that book has changed in 4 years.
Right.
Like,
Which would do different.
It's still selling as well as it did when it first came out, which is insane to me. And the kind of the genius on the business side of this book that I totally didn't anticipate, but now that I've recognized it as a strategy, I'm going to pretend like I did it on purpose. So all of my other books have to be translated into other languages.
This one does
and
not.
this one doesn't.
That's great.
This did not. This is
So,
great numbers. And your whole thing about you name your own block is like really great.
Yeah, you name your own block, and that
Which
goes
is
back
like
to
completely like not like
it's your quilt.
It
The
isn't.
quilt
Like Barbara
belongs to the
Blackman's
maker.
book is so cool because there's many names for the blocks, right?
Right.
So
Right.
add your name to the. It's
The
very
reason that
interesting.
there's 19th trading quilt patterns, and they were going west, and they were taking their quilts west with them, and they were showing people in California what they had made in Pennsylvania. There was no standardization for those block names, so they just called them what they, dirty windows, and this one was modified triangle tile and whatever. And so going without a name it's good. It's sort of in keeping with what people do anyway.
And I really feel like the maker. I really feel like the ownership of the quilt lies with the maker, and not with the pattern writer. I feel like as a pattern writer, I'm a facilitator to your creativity, but I don't own your creativity. And, I'm much more concerned with my own creativity than you doing exactly what I've said,
really
told you to do.
Because I get this feeling of like I should be following the pattern, which I'm not very good at,
I
I feel like I'm not supposed to be following the pattern. I'm supposed to be super creative, which I feel like I'm not good at either.
No, the
so
pattern,
I feel like this
it's
I'm
an
in the
interesting
mix,
conundrum because, and I have a lot of really close friends. Sarah Filkey in Australia, really brilliant Australian quilt maker, and I have endless arguments about what a pattern's role is. Her main business is writing patterns, and she feels like you should follow the pattern exactly how she's written it.
Right.
And I see the pattern as merely a suggestion.
Inspiration.
Right. And she hates it. And it's like we've argued about it, we've fought about it, like we're still friends, but like barely. No, just kidding.
Right.
But it's a really interesting thing but it also is because I'm fabric, she's pattern.
Sure.
For me, the fabric is the most important thing. I barely care what the quilt pattern is. It's about fabric placement and fabric choice and
contrast and color.
Yeah.
We have talked a lot,
Yeah,
a long
yeah.
time,
Yeah.
and I totally beyond adore both of you, and I'm just so excited.
Good,
So
good.
we have to do some talk
Okay.
about polka dots.
Okay.
Now we're
yes.
getting to the serious stuff.
Yes, let's get to the
Polka
serious
dots.
stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, so we are looking at some really cool. Your polka dots, the stripes and polka dots. I mean, your stuff is great, but I'm madly in love with the stripes and polka dots. Right? They're just like I just want to cuddle them all the time. So, intellectual property, like, do you have like? How do you deal with this? And do the people that this free spirit, like, I don't know. Tell me about polka dots.
I mean, I feel like a stripe and a polka dot is a really hard thing for me to say I own that artistically and creatively. I feel like it's sort of I feel like stripes and polka dots are sort of in the communal pot.
I think so.
I feel like the artistry of a stripe or a polka dot comes into the color and the scale.
It's a selection, arrangement, and coordination.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like,
I mean, it's like,
Now, but if somebody made, another company made, so this is pink and maybe salmon, would you say?
Yeah,
or like
watermelon,
purple?
because I don't like fish as much,
Okay.
but...
Do you feel like other fabric companies would not make
Okay,
this
if
version?
another fabric company put out 12 dots and 12 stripes that were the same colors as mine in the same scale,
Yes. Would you
I
get
would
that?
be like, F you losers. Like, that sucks. That's
and Free
stupid.
Spirit would probably go after them, right? Do you think?
I don't know. I mean, really, it kind of goes back to what my brother said a long time ago, which is if they're copying you, then they're behind you.
Right.
I mean, I've already moved on to the next installment of this in the studio that'll
So
be coming
cool.
out later
It's so great.
this year. So,
There's like the coolest,
like,
right? They're just the coolest.
I mean, is it worth going after? Not really. I feel like that's pretty petty. And I also feel like I love the stripes and the dots because they're necessary and they're useful. But is that where my creative soul lies? No. But you need them to go with the other stuff. Like it's like nobody just like shoves flour in their mouth, like the substance flour, like baking flour.
Right.
I've been to some crazy parties. I don't know.
Yeah, but you need flour in your life unless you're gluten free. I don't know. We can get into some specifics later, but you need these things and they're important.
Right.
But is anybody like, God, you know what I could use right now is a cup of flour?
And do you think that people are just not going to do that? Like are fabric companies?
I hope
gonna
they
be
don't
like,
do that.
But
I mean,
also, I mean, Free Spirit has a particular hand. So if if someone else did it and it's a line at maybe a big box retailer or something, it's not the same. It's not the same fabric because you have this particular.
And
thing.
I do feel like this is sort of these stripes and dots are the only thing I've ever designed that are really in danger of being infringed. Because how do you protect a polka dot? I think that's really difficult.
Okay, so I'm going to give you some more polka dots. Okay, this is one more thing that I have to ask you about, which you can't look at the quilt.
Okay.
Okay.
I won't.
When does it become protectable? Like, do you think this is? This is
I
like
mean,
a
I
circle.
think if you're
These
going,
are circles.
yes, I think
It's
if
not
you're going
yours.
to fight to protect that, I mean, I don't know
But it's
legally. I think if you're fighting to protect a polka dot, then you need to expand your skill a little
Well,
bit.
strangely, we've had a number of polka dot cases, like the polka dots. You know those boots that are like the black boots with the white.
Yeah.
Those were big litigation.
Yeah. Oh, really?
Yeah, and they found that they were protectable.
Oh, interesting.
Because they were strange, even though the process was the one that's making them. Yeah, so it's usually manufacturer to manufacturer, and it's usually like a company that suddenly I see it at Kmart, all those spaces, and it's manufactured, and it's I think business to business. Like, you've crossed the line. We need. To
I think there's more ethical boundaries than we can protect legally. Maybe sometimes.
Yeah.
I feel like I have a higher standard of that than others because I see other things that people do and the people I really like and admire, and I'm like, wow, stepping on toes. Like, I would never do that.
Right.
There was, free. I mean, this is a super random case, but Free Spirit asked me once a long time ago. They're like, "Would you like to put metallic ink in this?" And I said, "No, I can't do that." And they're like, "Why?" I said, "Because Melody Miller made that a part of the metallic inks in modern fabric. She brought metallic inks out of Asian fabric and Christmas fabric and into modern fabric. I feel like that's her vocabulary.
That's her brand, and
that's her. I mean, and I don't think she would consider it her brand, or whatever. But I really felt like she had done that in a very specific, targeted way, and for me to do that now would be a violation of that for her in some way. So I didn't do it, and I don't even think I've ever told her that. But I have a really kind of strict view of that.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's kind of the worst thing anyone could tell me is oh, you really took that from so and so or something. That would be heartbreaking.
To it, right? That there's a kind of more.
I feel like it's respect
sense
for another artist to sort of leave their vocabulary, their vernacular alone.
All right, this is the last one. Okay. So these are just houses. So this is just one of the schoolhouse sample-y things, right? So I just put the houses on, and the point was that now it's all their fabric.
Got it.
Okay. So this is a packet of fabric. I put them in houses. I was just playing with leather and weirdness, and I'm not good at quilting, so it's totally okay. But I also started to feel like I'm putting my U of D, my universe of discourse, and my art onto theirs, but I've only used their material. And now suddenly, like, I've put my stuff onto their stuff, and they may not. You know what I'm saying? Like, do you worry? Do you know what I'm saying?
Tough.
Yeah,
Get over it. Get in a different business.
Because you feel like
I feel like I have
selling
no right.
your fabric
I
for
have
people
no
to
right
make stuff
tell
with
you
it,
how to
even
make
if it's
things.
good or bad. You don't care.
If you use all of my fabric and I have no right to impose my judgment on that.
I mean, look,
And that's the risk you take selling a raw material, right?
Well, as a writer,
tell me like that.
you write something. You can't possibly control who's going to quote you later or use your words for a purpose that you had no intention that they use it for. I mean, Nietzsche was like, I can't believe I just said that.
Yeah.
Sorry, but like,
totally
but you know, Nietzsche's like great, and he was used in like Nazi Germany to to support the cause. And but he would have he's dying to think that he's rolling over in his grave. But as a writer, I can't help it if you quote me, and I can't help it if you can also plagiarize me. You'll probably get away with it for a while, but one day you will be caught selling a bunch of stuff on Etsy in a bad way. But I mean, it's like, if you don't want to live in the world, don't be a creator who wants to put things out in the world. I mean, you are the deal
you have to
is
make yourself really vulnerable to put your work into the world.
We're buying your fabric. We can do whatever we want with it.
Yeah,
because that's the point: is to buy your fabric and make things, even good things, crappy things, interesting things, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, it runs the gamut. Yeah. And in addition to that, I make crappy things and good things and everything in between. Right. Everyone does. How am I supposed to say I'm sorry, you can't use my fabric because you're not skilled enough to honor it in the way I believe it should be honored?
I mean, that's horrifying.
Like, that's a terrible way to feel.
No, we were talking about. No, I don't think that there's another scenario to this, which is, I don't want you to copy my pattern, but you can be inspired by it. That there's a lot of people who don't want you to copy things. You don't feel that way either.
Wait, what do you mean?
Well, meaning like what. I'm a regular quilter. That's kind of my thing, right? I'm just like an average dorky quilter. What role do I have in this world? Like, what do you want me to understand about like what I can do and what I can't do? It's confusing out there. Do you know what I mean? Like, what am I supposed to be doing? You know?
It gets to the art versus craft divide.
Yeah.
It all goes back to that, because there are people who are snobs about who consider the hobbyist is a dirty word.
That's right.
And it is misogynist, and it is not okay, and it is snobbery. It is the height of snobbery to put out a product for people to use. It is fabric. It is fabric. You want people to use it, to buy it and have fun with it and be creative with it. You release your power to dictate what they do with it. Yeah. But there is a certain, you're saying you don't have it at all, which is exactly the right position to take. If someone says, I make this stuff and you can only make beautiful things with it, what you're saying is that most of you are not going to be able to handle that, because the hobbyist quilter or the quilter who's doing, you say, I'm a dorky quilter or whatnot. Right. These are the people. This is the bread and butter of the industry.
Right, we buy this stuff.
It's the backbone of the country.
That's right.
In terms of like demographics, and like it's very, very wrong.
It's the hierarchy thing. You're more important than I am.
Correct. And it's not
what
okay.
you want is more important than what I want.
Right.
I do all of this thinking by myself, drawing by myself, put out a product. If you are gracious enough to buy it, and if you love it, that's all enough. I want. Right. That's enough.
And economics is you're getting your money, and we keep buying your stuff.
If you want to do, if you're an artist who wants to do paintings and sell them for millions of dollars, fine. But if you're in this industry, if you're a fabric designer, if you're whatever, this is the deal you've made. Yeah. So thank God, right?
Every day I make with the intention of it being repeated. Mm-hmm. So if I make a quilt, I'm only making it because I'm hoping someone else wants to make it, wants to go to the store and buy my fabric to make it.
That's right.
Like, you have to be really aware of what this industry is, and this is that art versus craft thing. Like, this is. I'm selling you a raw material. I have no say over what you do with it.
I like you saying that's for sale doctrine.
And and what I'm really excited about is seeing what you do with it.
That's right.
Whether it's a beautifully finished quilt, or if it's
placemat.
like a placemat.
Whatever.
A mug rug, if you will. Like, I don't care what you do with it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just excited you're doing something with
your fabric.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, and to put parameters on that, and to feel for me to feel like I have some sort of ownership over your final product is really arrogant.
that I can have any kind of judgment about what you make out of my fabric is really arrogant.
All right,
and
you've kind of made my day. Like, you know, that's
yeah,
huge, right?
Yeah.
Because, like, it's our relationship with you as an artist, which is incredible. That, like, you are this incredible artist that gives us things to be able to, like, use. Then we get to make them. And there's a relationship there. And that's why we, like, go back to you, because we trust you and we love your stuff, and you help give us a palette to make things, and it's very moving. I mean, like, we spend
and then
hours
and how cruel
hours.
how cruel if Tula were to be the kind of person, or any designer were to be
Yeah.
the kind of person to send you a cease and desist letter,
Right.
or say something on a blog or a tweet about how this is ugly, and I'm
Right.
distancing
It's
myself.
not-
I'm distancing myself from this person's
Yeah.
work. It would be crushing in many ways, and it would be wrong. It would be against the spirit of what we're doing.
Well, we
Absolutely.
have, like, it's pretty awesome, and we'll wrap this up, because you've been way generous with your time, and I could have, like, a bazillion more questions, and I'm not going to do that to you. Man, this has been amazing.
Yeah,
like,
so
amazing,
very
cool.
amazing. You're both amazing. How to have a conversation with both of
Yeah,
you
it's
is
cool to
like,
do it together.
this is like the moment. This room has never been cooler. The 100-year history of the house. It's
I don't
like a
know. I was out in the
moment.
Louisiana heat all day. I've been cool. I mean, like,
It's-
I've looked better. I have to say, this is a good thing
The
for the
podcast,
radio.
the
This is
podcast.
good. Yeah.
I still look awesome. Just
Yeah,
in
you
case
do,
anyone's
you
ever
do.
wondering.
It's true.
It's
About
so true.
that, I
Any,
still look really great.
any last thoughts to talk to people out there? So these are the people who are listening are just regular people like you and me. Well, like me and not you. No, I'm just kidding. But, like, just regular people. And anything else you want to tell them, or thoughts about it? Besides, like, go buy fabric and go buy.
Yeah, go buy fabric.
And-
And I want to say this.
Yeah.
If you're a hobbyist, don't monetize your hobby unless you're really committed to making it a business.
It's really hard.
Like, either enjoy it,
Yeah.
just enjoy. Like, there are times when I really wish I could just be a hobby quilter again, where I could use any fabric. I mean, I can, but, like, like, where I didn't have to think so much about my choices, right? So it's like that's my retirement plan, to just, like, make
Just
stuff
quilt.
where I don't
You're
have
gonna
to
be
think
just,
about.
like, retired.
Yes,
lady quilting?
I'm gonna make quilts when I retire.
That's really
Yeah.
great. Mary,
Yeah.
did you ever? You were always, like, your quilting experience has always been professional, right? Like, you've always been a professional quilter from the beginning, right?
All the things I ever made were for something. And so only now, recently, if I made a quilt that is only for me. And it is remarkable. It is a very interesting experience.
What I think is so interesting about your background, because you were teaching, I know we're supposed to end, I'm not very good at ending, but we're going to end, is that you were in this business of teaching people. Your mother was very much part of, like, the whole commercializing, like, helping people learn, and yet you're way into the history, and you're way into the basic stories, you're way into the regular people, which is really interesting. Like, that you've kind of come, like, it's important that your voice is doing that, because it's not just somebody doing it, it's you doing it. You've been in the midst of this all of your life. It's really interesting.
I just think quilts can take it. Like, they can take this over commercialization, and they can take these zillions of people, flooding the market. They can take it, but they need our help. And I care too much about quilting in America to not do the work I'm doing. And I would rather, right now, read a book about the log cabin quilt than make one right now. And that's saying a lot. But we need this history. It's not safe the way it is right now.
No.
And
It isn't, 'cause there's
the
so
power.
many historical quilters right now.
They've never been given that information, and they didn't know to look for it. So the power of media and the written word is extremely powerful. Visuals are powerful. Words are powerful. And what we do with the responsibility that we have, the people who were in the revival, they were in their 30s. They were our age when they were starting the revival.
Yeah, that's your time.
Yes. And so all the women who are 60 and 65, who we love so much, they were our age when they started doing this. We will be their age very soon. And so it's up to us. It's
I
up to
love
us
it.
to do this.
Yeah.
I love
Yeah.
it. You guys are
Yeah.
wonderful.
Thank
you
you,
so much.
Elizabeth.
Thank you.
All right.
Great.
So this is Elizabeth Townsend Guard. You've been listening to Just Wanna Quilt, a research podcast coming out of Tulane University Law School. We want to hear from you. Join our army, our quilting army. Go to our Facebook page. Suggest people to be interviewed. Suggest yourself to be interviewed. We are excited to hear from you. But most importantly, I hope you get a chance to quilt today.